Have a motion to open the Finance Committee meeting. Chief, Bob, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We're open. I would like to suggest that we take things out of order because I think there are 3 articles here that'll go rather quickly, and then we can devote a whole pile of time to the all the community preservation work that's here. So I'd like a motion to hear Articles 10, 18, and 5, and once those are heard, then we'll jump back to the top of the page to 32 as a Finance Committee, and once we've done all of those 4, then we'll open the joint hearing with the Community Preservation and the Planning Board. As I see, the Planning Board is also in the advertisement, and that's why they're here tonight. So can I have a motion to do that?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Pat and Chief. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, great. So Article 10, revolving accounts. We had several big questions on that. Jim, did you want to kind of lead the charge on that, or you'd done some research here and gotten some pretty good answers from Bill Rowe? And I think specifically we had questions surrounding the Board of Health. Sorry, I should have give you a heads up. I was going to ask you about that. There it is. I have it.
When I was reviewing Article 10, I had some questions regarding some of the wording in here and the intent of it. So I contacted Bill Rowe to question him on it, and he came back with answers that were good enough for me. That was I was satisfied with the answers. My question was regarding the Article 10. The way it's written now, there's 4 separate subsections to the revolving funds. And it appeared when this was written, there ended up to be 5 separate sections. There was an addition of a Conservation Commission program to pay for the cost of lumber, fuel, expense, and supplies incurred in the construction and placement of bluebird nesting boxes at open space under the care, custody, and control of the Conservation Commission. That, it seemed to me, should be, there should have been a total to the Conservation Commission of $26,500 and not 2 separate items, one for $25,000 and one for $1,500. I questioned Bill about that. He agreed that the wording or there should be a separate a total and then a subtotal set up when we're discussing these things later. My second question regarded the hiring of the assistant sanitarian in the Board of Health. I always confuse myself when I start reading from the Mass General Law. And Mass General Law seemed to say to me that if you have a full-time position paid out of revolving fund, that the full-time position has got to not only include the salary, but the benefits package as well. As I read through this thing here, it did not have that. There was, the salary was paid, the benefits package was paid out of Medicare, the Medicare tax. I inquired of Bill whether this kept us in compliance with Mass General Law, Chapter 44. And he answered that it did, and that they had checked with this with the council. So that satisfied my questions, and I let it go at that.
Jim, was it because they debit back the Medicare charge back to the revolving fund for the benefits? Was that it, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was the basis of my question.
So everything actually does get corralled at some point, so it's billed.
Yeah, but it, to my mind, it doesn't seem to answer MGL Chapter 44. But if they've checked it with council and council says the way we've done it meets the law, then I have to be satisfied with it. I have no basis for checking it further.
Bill, did you want to weigh in on that? Or Mr. Town Manager, whomever?
This language was actually inserted last town meeting, and it was inserted and written by council so that it would be in accordance with Chapter 44.
Okay.
And the law the language regarding salary and benefits did not change versus what was adopted last spring. The only change in the Board of Health is the information regarding the tobacco control program and the dumpster regulations. Those were the only changes to the Board of Health, that and the amount.
And there's the underlying question, the second question in this is the last year the town meeting approved to adjust it up to 70,000 to accommodate the addition of the salary.
Just the addition of the staff. This year, the Board of Health has adopted a tobacco control program that will involve some enforcement. There are some fees involved. They've also adopted some dumpster regulations, and there will be fees for dumpster inspection and enforcement. And they requested the increase based upon their increase in fees.
So are the fees being charged to the town or fees that we're charging to businesses? Or
If you want a dumpster, you will now pay a fee at your business to the Board of Health.
so shouldn't it gone? Oh, so you are increasing how much we can put into
Correct.
it? Okay, I got it. So not how much we're going to spend, but how much we can put into it. I got it. Make sense? All right. Any other question on the revolving accounts from the committee? Great. Having seen none and moving on. Article 18, OPEB Liability Trust Fund. And this was to establish the trust. And I believe in an earlier hearing, we had approved to fund the trust, but this article was not included at the time, and they should have been heard in tandem. And I think we argued the merits, or debated or discussed the merits of the OPEB trust, but Mr. Kelly, did you want to weigh in on this particular subject?
Basically, it is an opportunity to enable the town to establish the trust, which is seen by the rating agencies, the bond rating agencies, as a necessity to have a decent bond rating going forward. They do not, at this point, get into anything other than the establishment of the trust and minimal funding of it.
Right. Yeah, and that would be the attraction from my standpoint as well as Moody's would look at this, if Moody's is who we're using, as a positive for the town, even though we're not fully committing to funding to it, but just by getting an entry-level investment into it, that's seen as an extremely positive direction from their particular standpoint. Not having it actually counts against us. So, okay. Any questions on that?
Rick?
Barbara?
I just have one question. If you put money into this fund at this time, do you have to establish how you get the money out and under what circumstances?
You can't take the money out other than for payment of OPEB.
Right, so OPEB is a certain bunch of benefits, correct?
It's other post-employment benefits.
So is there rules as to when you can get that money out to be used for that? Or is that need to be established at this time? Or is it a set of rules done by the government or what?
It's by the government.
Okay, so they're
as far
establishing all the rules.
Yes,
And
Okay.
it would be defined in the trust.
yes.
So everything's going to be done at that time?
We're just accepting the Massachusetts general law that allows the trust to be established.
If at any point in time, can the government go ahead and demand that you fund this once it is established? Would that
If
be
this-
part of this rule?
I think the state has shied away from it because it would be appealed by every city and town straight to the auditor's office as an unfunded mandate. And considering that you're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars for each city and town, I don't think the state wants to bite into that amount of cash yet.
Okay, worst case scenario, can we disavow the trust at some later date if we want to?
Can you dissolve it?
Yes, can you dissolve it at some later date if you so desire?
Only if you put a provision in for that, into the trust when it's created.
So if we wanted to be able to turn this down at some later date, we would have to do it at this time?
Yeah, it would take some attorneys to do that, I think, but
I think you would have, once you establish, you would have to most likely exhaust the trust and very possibly pay all of the outstanding OPEB debt before you could dissolve it.
Okay, it's just that, you know, if we're doing something, I want to know all the ramifications before we go ahead and do it, and then find out, you know, 5 years down the road that, oh, we should have probably thought about that.
I think
Okay.
the major issue right now is it's not heavily counted against the town as far as the bond rating goes, but we've been told that each year we don't do it, they will consider it more important within the bond rating equation that they use.
Okay, thank you.
right, and cities and towns have the same opinion that we do. Why would we put $120 million away in an account to sit there until the point where we go out of business, which is when you'd start using that money, when there are so many priorities in cities and towns around the state that would put billions of dollars away because of what really boils down to an accounting change. So the accountants are wanting to see this on the books as a liability.
Yeah, GASB is mandating almost all liabilities now be carried on the books.
Right. Yep, Jim? And then
Mr. Kelly, where does this money go?
sits in a trust and a bank account.
It's a trust fund.
And so this is going to be invested again, and if they do the kind of investment they did the last time they were putting things in budgets, we could end up footing this bill again? You know,
I'm
well,
not
the
understanding.
pension fund, the Old Colony Pension Fund, they lost money in 2008, and now they're billing
No,
people for
this is a trust fund that the town is establishing to place money for post-employment benefits such as retirees' health insurance. Right now, we pay for it on a pay-as-you-go situation. And because of this new accounting that, method that the accounting board, the National Accounting Board, is establishing, they want us to carry all of the liabilities on the books. When we carry all the liabilities on the books, it deflates our bond rating. So the rating agencies have said, if you create this trust fund, which will be managed by the town, not by an outside agency, and fund it minimally, they will say we are making an effort to deal with this 120 to 30 million right now debt that's sitting on our books.
And any dividends or interest that come about as a result of this money going in this account will go into the general fund or go into this
It'll
account?
go into the account.
Into the trust.
It'll stay in the trust. But I'm not advising putting a great deal of money in this.
I understand. But eventually, I mean, these things do build up over time, and I was just curious as to where it was going and who was going to manage it, so.
Well, as long as we continue to pay as you go, the minor money in the account will sit in the account, and it will accrue minimal interest, but it is only there to ensure that the town keeps the good bond rating it has.
Who manages this money? I don't like money floating around in accounts and, you know, just, there's a vagueness to this. There's a vagueness to this that I don't yet understand.
We would, the money would be managed through the treasurer collector's office.
All right, thank you.
Right, and Jim, they produce a cash book, so we know where all that money is, and it's reviewed, I would say weekly, but
And
there's many accounts out there.
I'm sure annually the auditor will cite, show it on the report, and so that the bond agents, rating agencies will know that we have done it and we have put some money into it.
Peter?
Mr. Kelly, what's the minimal amount that we can put in this to establish the fund?
The minimum would, I don't, there isn't a minimum I know of, but it would probably be whatever the bank would accept as far as a small account, but
Well, let's say the town put in $5,000. Okay, is that something that's gonna have to be, every year you gotta put money in it, or just have that initial 5,000, that's it?
That's it.
Okay, that's right.
And then the town can make the decision every year after that, so.
yeah.
Why keep putting it in if it ain't gonna?
And if
required.
we're paying as we go, there is no real incentive to put any additional money in.
Okay,
It is to strictly please a government accounting board so we can keep our bond rating.
okay, good enough.
Any other questions? Okay. Moving on. We're back up to the top of the agenda. Article 32, Community Preservation Committee.
Did you skip Article 5, Rick?
Did I?
Yeah, 18, Article 5. Supplement fiscal year 2014 to.
Oh, sorry. Yep, sorry about that.
Page 3.
So that's a question for the town managers. So supplemental fiscal year departmental budgets, is there any? Oh, there's Bill. You guys are so interchangeable.
Good evening. Still don't have final numbers yet. It appears that only the insurance budget will be needing supplemental transfer. Don't know how much yet. So far we've spent out of the health insurance line, not the bottom line insurance budget, but the health insurance line. The budget is $6,864,000. So far through December, we've spent $3,800,000.
$3.8 million.
$3.8 million. So we have $3.1 million left in that line. So continuing the same trend, we're going to be considerably overdrawn in that line.
Are all the
Not in the
receipts,
bottom line, but
are all the receipts booked?
well, I was looking at the expenses.
Mhm.
I'm looking at the appropriation line, the expense line. So we've expended town share $3.8 million. A little less than $3.8 million. With $3.1 million left.
Through when, Bill?
So through December, half a year, half a fiscal year. So.
And the run rate's ahead of what we would normally have anticipated, or historical measures, or?
Well, Donna's trying to work out a projection for the final 6 months. So that we can have something for, town meeting, but I still would recommend that you refer this to town meeting because we don't have the final amounts yet, so.
Were there some unusual big spike expenses in there that are like one time that really have driven this? Or is it a
Well,
cumulative- is it a bunch of-
this particular line is employee-based. In other words, this is the line that matches the employee contribution, the 70%.
Right.
Versus 30%. So, whether there's spikes, I'm not sure. I don't know.
Are you concerned that you're going to be underfunded or over-expensed, is the question?
Well, we would be under budgeted and over-expensed on the original budget, the amount that was budgeted by town meeting.
Okay.
So it looks like, continuing along with the same trend, we're going to be, $7.3 million, $7.4 million, and the budget is $6.8 million, so.
Yeah, it seems high to me. It's
Yeah.
all right, though. All right, any other questions?
That's the health insurance. Now, the workers' comp, that's in deficit about 150 now. And we probably might have some large claims coming as well. So.
And that was in
that's
workers'
right
comp?
up, that's right up to date. That's right through March 31st. So.
But we did have some unusual expenses there.
We do have some claims coming down the pike, I understand, for Jamie.
Okay.
Yep, So what we'll do is, rather than look for the free cash, we'll look at other departments first to see if we can fund it with other departments, like maybe short-term interest or something that might have a surplus in it. And then, but anything else would have to be made up with, free cash, so.
Wait till May?
Yeah, I think we have to refer it to town meeting. Maybe we'll have one of those meetings in the classroom, we'll have some numbers for you for the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, hopefully we can hang on to the finance reserve.
But
until then.
we're working on a projection now. Donna's working on a projection, try to project the last 6 months for that health insurance, so.
Okay. Well, as soon as you can get those two projections
Yep.
out, that'd be great. Have we met with General Benefit Strategy yet?
I don't know.
Do we have their recommendations, the town manager, the Human Resources
next year,
Director
yeah.
saying yes?
Yeah.
Do we have their recommendations? Can you forward them to this committee, please? Thanks. Were they what you thought they were gonna be, or? Did they write an overview of their opinion on all of this and what's in the report and where they see challenges and opportunities here? Or is it just a static report with what the numbers are in the years and?
We're meeting with them after they meet with the insurance advisory committee this week.
Okay.
This year is the real concern. The real concern is next year with the Affordable Care Act, and they're still analyzing some of the issues that might seriously affect not only the plan design, but what plans we will be offering.
Okay.
Do you mean 2016 when you say next year?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, 2015/16, right? Yeah. Okay. It does get muddled. Any other questions from the committee about supplemental funds? Okay. Thanks so much. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Jamie. So, are we all set to move back up to the top for Article 32? And this is the community preservation budget. So we'll review the budget first as a committee, and then we'll go into the public hearing to talk about the individual articles within the community preservation articles. Dwight, did you want to present the budget, or is somebody here to do that? Bill, are you going to present as well, or? So somebody from the committee and Bill, there you go.
Yeah, Bill did the bulk of it.
And I'm sorry, what was your name?
Michael Barrett?
Michael, welcome. Bill, welcome back.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Michael was very good to go through and review this for me, and
Has everybody got the handout?
caught a couple of things on me, which was good. So we fixed those. So basically, what happens is you have to establish an operating budget, and the operating budget is going to be based on your estimated next year revenues. So in the first column, in the middle section there, fiscal 2015 estimated revenues is what we estimated for the various items. Surcharges, 533,000. The state reimbursement, the DOR estimates that's going to be 23% of our net receivable. Now, the net receivable is at the top. It's your commitments less your abatements, your estimated commitments less your estimated abatements. So that net receivable is 536,092. So we're estimating 23% of that to be 123,301. Investment income, 2,500, and other, which would be tax liens redeemed, et cetera, things like that. So the total estimated revenues would be 663,801.
Bill, can you explain what the CPA commitments are again?
Commitment is a bill for surcharges. We put a bill, we look at the properties in town, and the assessor puts a bill together.
Okay.
And bills it to, just like the real estate tax bill. So that's called a commitment. And that goes to the collector. It's committed to the collector for collection.
Okay.
So
And the 23% is the match from the state that you're talking
23% is
about?
the projected match from the state for fiscal 15, which would come in probably October of 2014.
Okay, great.
Okay, so those are our estimated revenues, and I'll go along with the other items in the funding source section there. We have 4 components of fund balance. We have reserves. We have 3 reserves, one for each of the CPA purposes: open space, historic resources, and community housing. And those are the balances as of June 30, 13 in those reserves. 59,463, 123,84, and 239,784. And again, those are funding sources which are available for appropriation for for this fiscal year or next fiscal year. And then the last column is your undesignated fund balance for the community preservation. That's a kind of equivalent to the general fund's free cash, okay? It's kind of equivalent to the general fund's free cash. They call it the undesignated CPA fund balance. Okay, and that's $1,274,382.
Where does that money reside?
Well, it's all in Fund 14, the CPA fund. It's basically your assets minus your liabilities. So all these reserves plus the undesignated would be your net fund balance, your net owner's equity, so to speak. CPA, yeah, we have a separate fund for the CPA, Fund 14, yep. Mm-hmm.
Ratings agencies look at that as another reserve for the town.
You know something, Rick? They just look at the general fund. That's all they're interested in. Since I've been here, that's all they've ever been interested in is the general fund, so that's their main focus. It's funny, but okay, so those are the funding sources. Now we get to the appropriations and reservations. Okay, the first line is administrative expenses. You are allowed to appropriate up to 5% of your estimated next year revenues for administrative expenses. So 5% times the 663,801 would be the 33,190. And that covers secretary supplies, dues, the Community Preservation Coalition dues, things along that line, postage. It's not allowed to pay for any town expenses like town council or accountant or treasurer or anything like that. Just direct expenses of the association. The long-term debt service on the Glen Echo bond is 59,463. Well, I shouldn't say it's 59,463. It's 59,463 plus the 26,922 coming out of the undesignated fund balance, the total of those two. So you notice I only charged 59,463 to the open space reserve because that's the available balance in that reserve. Okay, the remainder has to come from the undesignated fund balance. Okay, any questions on that so far? The debt service for 80 out of 86,385. Thank you, Michael. Okay. Yeah. So 86. Right. Yeah. So the next one is the town hall slate roof. That debt service on that bond is $13,108, and that's coming out of the historic resource reserve. The pump station, the facade on the pump station, the debt service on that bond is $12,417. That's also coming out of the historic resource reserve. The short-term debt service, which has not been issued yet, but we have to provide for it anyway, on the railroad station is $7,500. And then we get into the articles, the historic home signage, 2,125, that's coming out of the historic resources reserve. That'll be cash article coming out of that reserve. And then the next 4 articles are borrowing articles. We have the acquisition and rehab of 710 Turnpike, the preservation of Swan's Tavern, $1,500,000 and $350,000 respectively. The Pierce Street Playground rehab, $585,000, and Article 57, the preservation grant for the State Theater, $550,000. The next line is the budgeted annual reserve fund. Now, the budgeted annual reserve fund is funded by estimated next year revenues, what can be used for, let's say we have projects that come up between July 1st and the time we close the books. That money is available for the CPA for town meeting to fund CPA projects if we had a special town meeting, say, in the fall. Then once we close the books, on or before October 31st, we file what's called a CP2 with the state. And then we have a new undesignated fund balance at that time. So a new CPA free cash, so to speak. But that 431 is available all during fiscal 2015 to fund any projects that come up. So, and then, now the requirement on each year you have to either expend or reserve 10% of your estimated annual revenues, your estimated next year revenues, for each of the 3 purposes. So traditionally we reserve 10% for each, although we know we would not be required to because we've expended in some categories, like for example the open space, we're spending more than 10% on the long-term debt service for Glen Echo. But you have to either expend or reserve 10% of your estimated annual revenues. And traditionally, we always reserve 10% for each of the reserve categories. So that's what that 66,380 is, 10% of the annual revenues for each of the categories. So, any questions on the budget? And then the next page is just a motion for the town meeting for the budget.
Rick, can I ask you
Admin,
a question about
debt
page 1?
service.
Sure.
Just because you have the articles in here that we'll be hearing later, I assume that the CPC has approved them? Because I know in the past we've had timing issues where things have come to us when the CPC hasn't voted yet.
No, the CPC has voted on each of these and is recommending that town meeting approve them.
Okay, thank you.
So although one of them is a citizen petition, it's something that can still fall under your umbrella because you've met and voted on it and appropriated funds for it.
I'm not sure what you mean by a citizen's petition, but in each case, somebody came before an open meeting of the Community Preservation Committee, presented, and we as a group then voted. In all cases, actually, I think it was a unanimous vote as well. But
Okay. Barbara.
I have a question. If we approve these articles, are you going to have enough money in the budget to pay for them if they're under long-term debt next year?
yeah, actually, at one of our meetings, I put forth a long-term projection to show that if we were to fully fund everything that we have approved over the last 3 years, as well as the things in this budget, then and it was all done at the beginning of the year, then next year it would only eat up 60% of our expected revenues, our expected money, and that would decline over time as the bonding fluctuates. But yeah, we have enough money.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right. Thanks so much. So before I open the public hearing, Planning Board, Joe, do you guys have a quorum? Okay, and the CPA, Dwight, you've got a quorum? I see a lot of nodding heads there, okay. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing to hear Article 33, Community Preservation Projects?
So moved.
A second? All those in favor, and we're going to
Aye.
need both boards and groups to all vote. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Abstaining? We're in session. Okay, so Article 33, the first one is, item A is historic home signage. Who would be presenting on this? I would assume somebody from community preservation. There you go, Dwight.
Dwight McCarron, Vice Chairman of CPC, standing in for John Morton tonight. Just starting with historic home signage. And I don't know if we're, I mean, you have the text in front of you, so I don't know that if you want me to read what's there or give my thoughts on it or just answer your questions.
Yeah, just give us the overview, what it is without,
The historic home signage is 25 historical homes, people who had expressed a desire to have a house plaque. But we had trouble funding it or figuring out how we're going to do it, so we're estimating about $80 a pop. We can put historical signs that replace the one that says, I don't know, Scott, what did the one say on your house? What date? Right, so there are more than 25 homes that 25 people wrote the historical commission and asked for them. Our plan is to request a donation in kind from each person that gets it and then extend it out after that. But this would be for house plaques that identify the homeowner who built the house and the date it was built.
okay. Any questions, Jim?
Who places them?
They're going to be placed on the front of the house. The expense of installing them, we assume the homeowner is going to do.
Thank you.
Other questions? Questions from either of the other committees or the public in attendance? Okay. Let's move on to item B, which is acquisition and rehabilitation for community housing for elderly at 710 Turnpike Street.
And I'll have Barry come up to sit beside me on these two because he was instrumental in applying for these.
Welcome, Mr. Crimmins.
You'll notice it's split between the housing component and then the historical preservation component of the actual Swan's Tavern, which is C. So it's two separate but related articles.
I'm sorry, Dwight, when you say it's split,
Well, I'll let,
If I may, Mr. Chairman, we have, the way it's done, 33B is basically the purchase of the 710 Turnpike Street property to provide upwards of 22 units of elderly housing. As part of that property, the Swan's Tavern piece also qualifies for historic preservation. So that's done as a separate article, which is 33C, which is the $350,000 for the historic preservation. Same property, two different uses as far as the Community Preservation Act is concerned. One portion is the community housing portion. The other portion is the historic preservation for the Swan's Tavern piece.
got it. And how many units was it, Barry?
Well, from our preliminary plans, we think we can get at least 20 units at 710 Turnpike Street, but part of the preservation of the Swan's Tavern piece will allow us to move our administrative offices from its current location over at 4 Capon Street, where they presently are, up to the Swan's Tavern piece. That will allow us to get 1 or 2, conservatively, additional units back online at 4 Capon Street. So the project gives us a minimum of 22 units, 20 at 710 Turnpike and 2 at 4 Capon Street.
Okay. So can you give us the background on this, the origins, how did this come up? It's,
Sure. Unfortunately, I do want to introduce our chairman, Kevin Wilder, is here tonight, along with member Arthur Slate, our executive director, Mr. Greg Bartlett, who's been instrumental in this project from the get-go, was unable to attend tonight because of a prior commitment. Greg was really the moving force behind identifying this property. Many of you may know that this property has been for sale for quite a while, and it previously housed the Charms Collaborative. More recently, it housed the Solomon Schechter Day School. Solomon Schechter Day School moved its school over to Norwood, and since then the property has been vacant. Greg approached, through the broker, the owner of the property. As many of you know, schools are a common example of a reuse for elderly housing projects. And so we early on, a couple of years ago, before my sort of second iteration on the Housing Authority, identified this property as a potential use for additional units of elderly housing. Quite frankly, it was then through contact through the Community Preservation Committee and the funding sources available through it that really made this viable. Without that funding, the Housing Authority would not be able to do this project. So by virtue of the community preservation funds being available, particularly in the housing area, we were able to enter into a purchase and sales agreement, as we have done with the owners of this property. It's contingent upon a couple of different things. It's contingent upon town meeting approving the 2 articles that are before you tonight for funding. It's also contingent upon receiving approval at town meeting for a zoning change that would be necessary to allow us to use the property for elderly housing. And then the zoning change provides for a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So it would also be contingent upon our obtaining that approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So we have entered into a purchase and sales agreement subject to those approvals. If all goes well at town meeting and then at the Zoning Board of Appeals, we are hoping to close on this property by the end of the year, and with a spring of 2015 construction start, and probably 9 to 12 months construction period to bring it online.
who's entered into the sales and the purchase and sales? Is that the Housing Authority itself?
The Housing Authority would own and operate the property, yes.
Questions? Bruce, then John, then Pat.
This property that's at Swan's Tavern for 20 residential units plus office space, how many parking spots are you allocating per unit?
Short answer is I don't know the exact allocation per unit, but there's more than enough parking there. There's parking in front of the building, and there's plenty of parking to the rear. 40? Thank you, Kevin.
So 40 parking spots on the property for the residents and the office space. Mm-hmm. I just hope it doesn't turn into what's over on, what's the street that Randolph Savings is on, Prospect, Pleasant, 139, where a lot of the residents end up parking out on the street, and in the winter that gets a little treacherous because nobody's ever bothered to tell them that they can't park on the street. Because Turnpike Street cannot handle that.
We have 68 units at 4 Capon Street and very little parking. That's the problem over there. We'll have more than enough parking at 710 Turnpike.
I'm just concerned because Turnpike, when you take a right onto Turnpike Street from Central Street, if people parked on the street, because when the school was there, they were using the house across the street as additional parking, and then it gets very treacherous, and that isn't some place where you can be having that overflow onto the street.
Right. The school's parking requirements would have been much greater than our parking requirements will be.
The schools would have been greater?
Sure, absolutely. Between faculty, staff, students,
students weren't driving to that school.
They had to get there somehow.
They were being dropped off or bussed over, but I think number of cars that will be there on a regular basis are much greater with your use as opposed to the school's use.
The point's well taken, but just based on our experience at the elderly housing complexes we presently own and operate, 4 Capon Street, Stoughton Memorial Village, Wasivita Court, we're confident we'll have plenty of parking there.
Okay, John Malley?
So the purchase price is gonna be the 1.5 million?
No, the purchase price is considerably less than that. That's the purchase price plus rehabilitation cost.
Do you have those two numbers broken out, Barry? What's the purchase price?
The purchase price is $700,000. Down from something like 1.9 million that it was on the market
Yeah,
for.
well, it's assessed for over $1 million, so.
Yeah.
That sounds like a fair deal.
So and the rehab will cost 800,000.
Is there like any outdoor recreation area for the?
There is an area presently behind the building that was used by the school that we anticipate having available for sort of a picnic recreation area.
All right, and see, putting it way over here, I wonder why we can't put more things sort of in the downtown area. This is not on the bus route. It's not near any stores. It's not really near anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's fine, I guess, if the people living there can all drive, but if not, they're all still relying on taxis and the senior shuttle and that sort of thing. I don't know. Has the housing authority looked downtown? We have so much empty area downtown. Have they looked downtown to put something in the area so it will be at least on the bus route? I mean, you've got tons of open space.
Mm-hmm. We're always looking for opportunities. This is an opportunity that came up that, again, quite frankly, was something that we felt was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Hate to overuse a cliche, but a property that is already set up because of the school that was in there with a relatively easy retrofit into apartments, already sprinkled, already has an elevator. So it has a lot of systems already in place that lend itself quite well towards a conversion to apartments. With the exception of, again, our 4 Capon Street property, you know, most of our properties are located, you know, some distance outside the center of town. If an opportunity were to come about in the center of town that we could do something in addition to our 4 Capon Street property, we would love to do that. But
Yeah, that was a concern of the CPC, and we asked them, but they persuaded us that all things considered, it was a good deal. And Mr. Linehan has reminded me to mention that it does increase our affordable housing stock.
Definitely.
But all the units, all of our units, all the housing authority units are countable on the affordable housing inventory through DHCD. We also, as it's not directly germane to the articles before you, but on the issue of downtown, one of the reasons our zoning article addresses not only the zone that the property is located in, but the downtown zone, the Central Business District, was because it was expressed by the Community Preservation Committee that they would like to see us do something in the downtown area, which again, we would love to do if an opportunity presented itself. And if it does, since we have to make this zoning change anyways, we also extended the proposed amendment to include the Central Business District.
I'm good.
What were the zoning changes that have to be put in place here, Barry?
Right, so the property is in what's called the RB zone, B as in boy. Right now, housing for the elderly under the auspices of the Stoughton Housing Authority is allowed by right in the RM zone. It's allowed by special permit in the RU zone, and it's allowed by special permit in the RC zone. This amendment would extend those two zones where it's presently allowed by special permit. It would extend it into the RB zone, once again by special permit, and it would also extend to the Central Business District.
So it makes it much more usable.
It couldn't be used without that.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there any chance that we'd approve a zoning change and this deal fell through and now the owner has all this new zoning approved?
Well, not with our article is limited to housing through the Stoughton Housing Authority. There is another article that we were asked to present on behalf of the property owner.
Right.
That would allow for the conversion of existing non-resident structures to housing for the elderly, and frankly, it was requested for just that reason, in case the zoning changed, but we weren't able to complete the purchase for whatever reason. So they said it would have a zoning change without the ability to do anything with the property if we weren't able to complete the transaction. And the article that they asked us to submit, which we did and which the selectmen voted to insert, would allow for housing for the elderly by an entity other than the Stoughton Housing Authority.
Okay, Pat, or is it Barb?
I'm not sure if I'm jumping the gun here or not, so tell me if I am, but I'm just still a little confused on why we have the 1.5 million and the 350,000. I understand they're two different pockets of money from the CPC, I get that, but why do you need the two different pockets of money? I understand you said that the 700,000 was the purchase price and the 800 was to rehab. What's this $350,000 for?
Yeah, that figure, I'm sorry, Rick, I should have mentioned at that time, it's not, that 800 is not, the rehab price is upwards of $3 million. That's why we, looking for the amount of money that we're looking for. But Pat, it's exactly what you just said, because it falls under two separate and distinct sections of the Community Preservation Act. One for community housing, which is the 1.5 million piece for the housing for the elderly, and the other piece is the historic preservation for the Swans Tavern piece. The school portion, if you will, that we're converting to housing that would not fit the criteria for historic preservation, and vice versa. The Swans Tavern piece would not fit the criteria for housing.
So I'm just not familiar with the building. Are there two sections to the building?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Swan Tavern's one building.
Yeah.
And then the other one's.
What happened was, here's basically, you have the original Swans Tavern piece, the old colonial style building right on the corner of Central and Turnpike. They then later added sort of a piece in the middle, and then to the left of that, they added the piece that goes to the rear, which housed the school.
Okay.
So it's sort of, if you will, kind of three sections to it.
So the 1.5 million was for what you were referring to as the school section.
Right.
And you'll use this 350 to do what specifically?
To rehab the Swans Tavern, to bring it up to code and do what we need to do to outfit it for our offices. And we also have had discussions with the town manager about the possibility of making space available for other town offices, because we don't need all of the space that's up there.
Okay, and just back to the 1.5 million again. So if 700,000 was the purchase price, you asked for 1.5 million, but the rehab is over 3 million.
Right.
What are we doing with the 800,000?
The total project cost, we estimate about $3.5 million, so we're gonna have to get financing for the balance.
Okay, so we're just giving you part of the money you need
Exactly.
to rehab, and you're gonna go elsewhere for the financing
Exactly.
for the rest. Is it possible you won't get that?
Is it possible what?
That you'll get this 800,000 from CPC, but you won't get the additional money you need to finish the rehab? Well, I'm just wondering what will happen to the money if that...
Right, but the way the vote of the CPC was, and Dwight, correct me if I misstate this, the CPC money is sort of the last in money. We have to have the other funding in place before the CPC money comes into play.
Okay, so there's no chance that we would lose this?
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
great. Thank you, Barry.
Peter, excuse me, Peter, Scott, Roberta, and Joe.
What about me?
Oh, but first, Barbara.
Thank you. Okay, I just have a couple of questions. Remembering from the Glen Echo, you have to get an appraisal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, has it already come in?
We have not got the appraisal that we would need to get, but there was an appraisal done when the current owners refinanced the property last year. I don't have that figure off the top of my head, but there was an appraisal done last year. We will do a new appraisal ourselves.
And there's something like you can't be 1% over, there's a number, right? You have to be within that appraisal in order to be able to use town funds?
Correct.
Okay. And my second question is with the affordability. You said that it was definitely going to count toward our housing, but we've had other projects that have supposed to be counting towards our housing, but because the deed was not done correctly, it didn't get recorded. So I'm assuming that you guys know this and are going to make sure that that deed gets and the other question was, how do you pick the tenants to go in here?
I'm sorry?
How do you pick the tenants to go in here?
We picked them off of our waiting list that presently is over a year for most elders to get housed.
And they have to pass a income,
There's an income requirement, and then there are preferences. There's a local preference, there's a veteran's preference, et cetera. So there's a whole application process. It's screened at the Housing Authority office. They have to meet the criteria. And then as they move up the list, when an apartment becomes available, they are notified. If they refuse to take the apartment that's offered to them, they go back down the list.
okay. And the last question is, so this is going to be run by the Stoughton Housing Authority, and so this building will be in their use for as long as they want it?
Hopefully for as long as we're all here.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. But if for some reason
Same as all of
they,
our other properties.
right, but if for some reason they decide not to use it, it goes back to the town? Let's just say. They decide it's a terrible location, they hate it.
To be honest with you, I hadn't anticipated that scenario, so I guess I don't know what the short answer to that is.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Peter?
Barry, I want to commend you and your group for what you're doing here to help the elderly for housing.
Thank you.
It's a nice old historic building that goes back supposedly to the Revolutionary War. And before this is said and done, you're going to hear that General Lafayette slept there. Well, she didn't. The only Lafayette that slept there, that worked there, was in the 60s, Levitz and Lafayette, attorneys at law. That's the only Lafayette. All right, that being said, you know, we should restore the original building. And I and a lot of other people in this room took a tour there on a Saturday. And it's a brand new fairly new building. It's in good shape. And they have a function hall there that could be used for entertainment and cafeteria. And as far as, you know, that being, address some of the questions here, it's far from the square. But North Stoughton there has a lot of facilities there. You got Dunkin' Donuts nearby. You got TJ Fridays and a couple other restaurants over there on the other side of the highway. You got a theater. And I'm sure a lot of the busing for these elderly are going to be done by the Council of Aging. So that shouldn't be a problem for them. And I think you got a small area sidewalk you have to put up with. But that being said, I think you guys should be commended. You're doing a wonderful job, and I hope it goes through.
Thank you.
It's close to Home Depot, too.
Yeah. I don't think they need Home Depot.
Okay, Scotty?
I won't touch on what Peter's already hit on, the fact that it is historical. Mostly there's no drain on the schools with what they're trying to do. It's federal money. It isn't like it's coming out of the town's budget. Yeah, the CPA's kicking in here, but it's not something that's going to be in perpetuity, that they're going to be looking for money every year. This is like a one-shot deal, and it is a one-shot deal, and I do agree with you, Barry. And to have that building sit there vacant does this town no service whatsoever. But to do what they're doing, in my eyes, for the money and what they're willing to expend, I think Greg and all them guys have done a great job. But that building does have a lot of history. My house is actually tied to that piece too, because of the gentleman who built my house is related to them. But it's a win-win for the town. You're going to see them better a piece of property. The people they put in there, they go through the process, like he says. Some drive, some don't. There's a lot of people that live out in the area of our town that get service from our Council of Aging buses, and they're not on the bus line. So, you know, don't condemn an idea just because it's not on the bus line. It's just somebody was thinking outside the box for a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Roberta, then
Also.
Bob. Okay, Roberta?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the presenters. We had discussed this previously at the Finance Committee. I brought up the fact that there was an article written by, well, it was an article that had quotes by Aaron Gorenstein and Patrick Duval about changing the 40B regulations. Now, the change would be this. It's a contemplated change in the regulations. That in order to increase in affordable housing for all peoples within the Commonwealth, many communities allotted many of their units for housing for the elderly and used that toward their 10% count. The emphasis of that article was to remove those particular units from the count so that housing for the elderly, particularly deed-restricted housing for the elderly, would be removed from the count. And therefore, I'm not saying you made a misstatement or anything like that. I think it's just a cautionary note. I don't think there has been a change in the regulation yet, but the article certainly was favorable to doing that because they want more affordable housing for other age groups other than skirting the 40B regulation by doing elderly housing. So my question to you would be, do you have to restrict this to elderly housing? Or could it be affordable housing instead of restricted to just elderly? Maybe that's something to look into. Then the project would qualify if they change the regulations.
Okay. I guess first, I'm not privy to the proposed change that you're referring to. So I'm just referring to presently, DHCD counts all of our units towards the affordable housing inventory. So I guess I can't really speak to the proposed change. The age restrict, there is an exception to the age restriction, which is that in our units, they have to be 60 years of age or older, what's referred to as low-income elderly or low-income handicapped who meet the criteria. There's in other words, a non-elderly component. In fact, we have to make approximately 13% of our units available to non-elderly low-income residents. But notwithstanding that, at least under the present regulations, all of our units do count towards the affordable housing inventory. So beyond that, I mean, I guess my general response would be if they make changes, they make changes, and there's nothing that we could do about that unless you're suggesting something that we could do.
I don't have a legal mind to suggest something that you could do, but we did discuss this at the Finance Committee, and my understanding was that someone, our attorneys were going to be keeping an eye on this if there was a change in these regulations or proposed change with hearings on these regulations.
Yeah, Mr. Ian Zavino from the Board of Selectmen actually, I think, commented to it, and that they pay particularly close attention to the Housing Council, and the Town Council is charged with monitoring that very closely.
All right, so if Town Council has been charged with monitoring that very closely, I think it's something that we need to take a look at. I think you have a wonderful project. I'm not opposed to the project. I just don't like to see our good intentions and the good intentions we've had in this community be completely circumvented by a change of rules in the middle of the game.
Right.
That's all.
I think the project is somewhat, if you will, neutral as far as, if there's a change that affects us, there's a change that affects us. If there's a change that doesn't, there's a change that doesn't. I mean, our primary focus is to provide additional units of elderly housing. It's an added bonus, in my opinion, that those units get to count towards our affordable housing inventory under the current regulations, and hopefully that will continue to be the case. But our mission is to maintain our existing stock of elderly housing as best we can, and to, when an opportunity presents itself, as this one has, to try to increase that stock of elderly housing.
And you ought to be commended for that.
Thank you.
Ms. Walsh? Should I say Vice President, Select Person, Ms. Cynthia Walsh?
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. I represent Precinct 2 in town meeting. I'm also on the Board of Selectmen, and I'm 66 years old. And coincidentally, I got my tax bill today. Those of us who are alone and living in our own homes are being priced out of them. Even with the cash back we get from the state, we're just holding on by the skin of our teeth. I get a lot of phone calls about that because people know that I'm a senior myself. And you may have heard the previous speaker, there's more than a year-long waiting list. There was some affordable housing in town, recently became out of affordability and is being turned into condos. Many of the people that lived in those apartments lived there since it opened in the 70s. So they've lived in Stoughton for 40 years. And now they have nowhere to go. I know I'm getting calls from people that have gone to the Housing Authority on behalf of their relatives that are being priced out. And they got told, I mean, the list is this long. And so her mother will be sleeping on the couch in her home. That's not fair. It's not fair that when I leave 1096 Park Street, that my family's paid property taxes on for 66 years, that I have to go to Canton or Randolph for a place to live. And I'm not the only senior that this has happened to. I've run into seniors who lived in Stoughton 40 and 50 years. And now they're living in Canton because they couldn't get an apartment here in Stoughton from the Stoughton Housing Authority. I guess Canton has been building faster, and they were able to get in. And to alleviate the fears of a previous speaker about parking, the Board of Selectmen can certainly put parking restrictions on Turnpike Street so that no one should be parking on the street. I did also tour the facility, and previous speaker didn't mention it's also air conditioned, which is going to be a very big selling point for many seniors. There's a nice backyard. It can be a really nice patio area, and the parking lot, even I didn't realize was as big as it is. The other benefit of this site, besides people have mentioned, it's a short distance from some of the best shopping in the area, is it's a hop and a skip, depending on if you're using a walker, to the Y. And the Y has some very generous programs for our seniors. And a call to the Council on Aging could get you a ride to the Y and home again. And we all know that just sitting in your apartment, whether you're a senior or not, is depressing. But with this site, it would be very easy for folks to go down to the Y, spend some time there. They have an eatery there, and then come home. And they've had some good nutrition. They've also had some exercise and some socialization. And it's in precinct 2, so I wouldn't have to run for office in another precinct.
Thank you.
Okay. I've got a couple questions. Mr. DeFelice. Well, he's on his way up. Barry, what is the backlog? How many people does the backlog represent? It's a year's wait. How many does that translate to?
Let me see if my colleagues can help me out with that one. Sorry? 150.
There are 150 Stoughton residents.
Not all Stoughton residents, but the majority are.
Okay. So being a resident of the town is not a requirement?
No, you get a preference, but we can't discriminate from somebody that comes into the town and applies for housing in Stoughton.
Because of the federal funding? Right. Okay, got it. Mr. DeFelice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to congratulate the Stoughton Housing Authority, all their members, and particularly Greg, for the foresight that they had. This building, and actually, fortunately, there was a number of us that were able to attend an earlier open house, and I think they're going to have another one, and hopefully, if they do, all the town meeting reps would be invited, hopefully it'll be before town meeting. So you all that haven't been there can really take a look at it. I mean, when you go in there, you could almost move into the building the way it is. It has a updated sprinkler system, as David would know. It's got, I think, another kind of a protection system. I remember seeing some kind of a thing on the wall there, but I don't remember what it was. It has an elevator. It has a parking lot. It has everything going for it, so that the only thing they really have to do is open up the interior and make apartments. There's a large room up there that would be like a room for people to gather and so forth. And there are some grounds, out, as mentioned, a relatively large parking lot out back. I think there's maybe a little parking in the front. There's a little lot there, I guess. I don't know if Barry counted that in with the 40 spaces or not. And there's actually a big area with a big swing set. Obviously, that can go, so that opens up some areas for other things to do. I also wanted to mention the question about whether it's a remote location. I live adjacent to Stone Inn's apartments, and not Stone Inn's, I'm sorry, West Stoughton Village, which is in West Stoughton. And that's probably as far as you can get away from Stoughton Center as you can. The project has been there since around 1972, 73, in that period, I believe is when it was built. It was in the early 70s. Still houses elderly. And many of the people do have cars, some do not. And I think one of the things that we have to remember, this is not a rest home where you're going to have to worry about people wandering around and this type of thing. This is a place that elderly are going to be able to reside in, as they do in all the other projects that they have. And I think, so I recall last year, our authority got some kind of an award for running one of the best, if not the best, authority in the state of Massachusetts. And I don't think we've given them enough credit even for that. Again, I think having something like this in a neighborhood is a nice thing to do too. Just the fact that you're not sticking people necessarily in a more urban spot, I think is good. People can look out the windows. There's a row of pine trees out there, and so it's a nice atmosphere for anyone to live in. So I don't think the concerns that were raised are really big problems. I mean, if you needed a couple extra spots, I'm sure you could carve a little area out of that lawn in the back if you needed it. I mean, if you had to do that. So again, as you know, Peter and I have been kind of proponents for doing some things for the elderly. We didn't have much luck doing that. This is a no-brainer, and not only are you going to be able to do something for the elderly, you're going to preserve one of the most historic spots that we have. I believe it was built like in 1807. That's historic. So it's a twofer, and I would hope that the committee would go along with this. And again, congratulations to the board for taking advantage of this opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, services, water, trash, sewer, et cetera, snow plowing, is that all, how does that all happen?
Well, water and sewer provided by the town. We provide the trash pickup. We do that ourselves for all our projects.
Okay. And the water is just provided by the town as well, or? Okay. I do have to comment, is there any, if you go to the town's website and look up the Housing Authority, there's nothing there.
We're a quiet agency. we like to go under the radar. The old saying about, no news is good news. If you've heard of us, we're doing, nowadays housing authorities don't want to get in the news, believe me.
But it's a good story to tell.
But yes, it is. And in all seriousness, I appreciate the comments that have been made. I mean, this is my second stint on the Housing Authority. I don't say that for any reason in terms of taking a credit for things that my predecessors and my current colleagues have done, but the authority does good work. It is, I think, somewhat underappreciated, but one of my frustrations when I was on the authority previously was the inability to add to our existing housing stock, and that was primarily because of budget restrictions at the state level. And so with this opportunity here, and again, I need to reiterate that Greg was really instrumental, Greg Bartlett, our executive director, in spearheading this drive. But the whole board got behind this very early on. It's been well received at the various public hearings we've had before the Community Preservation Committee, because, once again, I hate to use the adage win-win situation or no-brainer, but I guess it does apply in this particular case, because I think it's something that, it's hard to find a downside to something like this. We're providing additional elderly housing for our residents. We're preserving a property, and we're helping to reduce the waiting list that we presently have. So I think it's, we look forward, hopefully, to your support. We look forward to the support at town meeting, and then the community in general has been very supportive of us through the years at all of our projects, the fire department, the police department, and DPW. As you can well imagine, one thing with elderly housing complexes, there are a fair amount of service calls. Dave can attest to that from his experience, and some of them are as little as burnt toast in a toaster, and some are obviously more serious than that. And I think we've worked well with our fellow service providers in the town, and we appreciate their efforts to support us. I do want to mention, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I was reminded that we are planning a second open house on Saturday, April 26th, that all the town meeting members and finance committee members and other town officials will be invited to. It will most likely be sometime, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., something in that range. We haven't set the exact time. There will be notices going out to all of you. There'll be a small ad in the Penny Saver in the next week or so announcing that, and the idea was to have it as close to town meeting as possible. I do think it's important, and I would encourage all of you, if at all possible, to try to attend the open house, because I don't think you can truly appreciate this property without seeing it, and seeing it on the inside as well as the outside. So hopefully you can all attend the open house, and again, thank you. Whatever you want to provide, Mike.
Any other questions from any of the committees or the public? Roberta.
Sorry to ask this question. I understand that the Housing Authority makes a payment to the town. You are one of the only properties in town that does do this, which I commend you for.
Mm-hmm.
Payment in lieu of taxes.
Correct.
Pilot program.
Correct.
If you acquire this other piece of property, will you be increasing the amount that you pay to the town in your pilot program?
That's a good question.
I think it's a very good question.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I mean.
So much easier to say yes.
Just say yes.
Well,
find out.
You need to include that in your budget, because will be coming off the tax rolls, so if you want to.
Well, that property is presently not on the tax rolls anyways, because it's owned by a nonprofit, but.
But the point is, how about increasing that pilot program?
I can't sit here and speak for my colleagues.
I know.
And the question would be, would he pay it back to the town or to the CPC that gave him the money? I mean, that.
Yeah.
Well, at any rate, I try.
I mean, those sort of operational questions we'll have to look into.
Thank you.
She wrote it down. You better follow it.
I know.
Okay. I think that we're all done with the questions on this item. We'd move on to item D, Pierce Street Playground Rehabilitation.
I'll give up my seat to John. Thank you very much,
Thank
everyone.
you, Barry.
And please attend
Thank
the
you very
open
much.
house if at all possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
CPC approved the request for which Mr. Dennison will probably be more specific about for the cat playground on Pierce Street.
Welcome, Mr. Dennison.
Thank you. What I've distributed is actually called a donor appeal guide, but I'm really not using it in that way here. It actually shows pictures of some of the amenities, that playground amenities, equipment, and benches and that sort of thing. So I thought that might be a good reference guide for you. I also have a design plan back here to my left, your right. Shows the park and the affected area. This is actually phase 2, in a sense, of a 2-phase project. Phase 1 began with the CPC and annual town meeting last year. We were given design funds, hired quickly, went out to bid, hired a landscape architect, and began our design work. Returned to the CPC this year, 2013, end of 2013, November. They have tight deadlines you have to meet. With a rough design plan, and they authorized the 580, up to 585 in the article. Since then, we've been fine-tuning design, and we're essentially done with the design phase in order to be ready for town meeting and ideally to go out to bid for construction. This kind of a playground structures, playground installations need to be installed in the, for the most part, in the summer. The playground design and what the town will get were very much influenced by several factors. First of all, the neighborhood, its traffic flow, its ability to handle a lot of noise, how much noise they could handle and so forth, was a major consideration. We knew the CAP Playground Children's Adventure Play Space Project, i.e. CAP. We knew it would be taken down. It has been taken down. It was not taken down in anticipation that this would get funded. If this does not get funded, there will be no playground there. But we had to take it down. For all intents and purposes, without getting into a million details, it was condemned. It was no longer safe, and we could not maintain it. The replacement playground pieces are something we believe we can maintain within our budget. Couple of features in it, namely a poured-in-place surface under the tot lot elements will make it a little bit easier for us to maintain. That is one of the more expensive pieces of this playground. It also makes it more accessible for children with disabilities and parents with tots who might be in a stroller, that sort of thing, without wading through sand or wood chips. We also took into consideration in design some problems, some issues we've had at that site for many, many years. I consulted very carefully with our police department and our OASIS under the Youth Commission, Organizing Against Substance Abuse in Stoughton, and got a lot of good guidance from them. So the playground we're proposing is not just a playground. We're trying to enhance the amenities, make it a kind of an enhancement of the park. The park is a bit of a gem. It's widely used by people of all ages. And we want to extend that park feel down into what was the CAP area. and extend the walking paths, provide some better lighting down there, and a security camera or two, and also provide some playground amenities for children. We have a focus on some tot structures with a couple of structures for older children. So that is essentially the plan, and that's what CPC has authorized. We are attempting to, you know, and they were very much like with previous projects. They look for grants and additional sources of funding. The best, our best that we could do was providing in-kind services. Our Public Works Department has already done a lot of work there, saving us thousands, tens of thousands in demolition, and we'll do some more work along the way. We are also, I will be appealing to individuals or businesses if they wish to donate towards this, a playground piece. I've already had one family who's interested in a memorial bench, and they've committed to it, and there may be others. Selectmen approved the that notion of the gift toward the playground a few weeks ago at one of their regularly scheduled meetings. So that being said, I think it will be a wonderful complement to an already beautiful park. A lot of support from the neighborhood, who saw the proposal as being sensitive to what the neighborhood can tolerate. It does address younger children. We're kind of targeting that audience. However, there's amenities for a couple of play structures for older children as well. Kind of preserve the notion of a big slide and swing sets for older children. So we're at this point, and if you have a question, maybe I can answer it.
Questions from the committee or either boards or committees? Bruce, then Peter.
I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago when you were here with some other article also, and you said you talked about putting a security camera in. Is a single or two security cameras going to be enough of a deterrent for the stuff that goes on there today? Because my kids go to extended, my daughter goes to extended day, I have friends that live in the neighborhood, the kids use that park for playing ball, they go across the street to the playground. The other element of people that use that playground at night, I mean, some of this stuff is very nice equipment that are in other playgrounds around the area that we've taken our kids to, and I'm just afraid of the damage. The other element, and there's nothing that you can do about it. I understand that you can only do so much. To make this available for the youth of Stoughton is a good idea, and it's appreciated by people with younger kids. It'll be nice for whatever period, but the ongoing maintenance and the other element that may, like I said, the police have other work to do. They have their regular jobs. They make a drive-by, kids hide, and all of a sudden they come back as soon as the cop drives by. You did it, I did it. We all do silly things when we're young, but you know what I mean? So I'm just, yes, you did. The investment of this money into this worthy cause could be destroyed by a few. And that's my biggest concern, because that area is very well known to be how, like, even during the day there's kids over there. Like, I go pick up my daughter extended day, you can smell the burning herb that's coming from the playground over across the fence line into the extended day area, and there's nothing they can do. They need to get the kids out of their building.
Short answer to your question is we're part of the project and the plan is security cameras. We've met with the town's contracted security company who has done a lot of work in the school, has done the fiber optic network in town. They came to the site and they assured me that the 2 cameras we're proposing would in fact cover way more than I thought they would, and even give us shots right all the way over to the basketball court where the police indicate on occasion they have some problems. What they won't do is they certainly won't catch anything down in the woods on the backside. However, I think we'll go a long way, but the design goes a long way toward helping us with that too. And that, in speaking with the police department and Oasis, you know, the new it will be a much lower key kind of a playground. The CAP was wonderful in its time, and I sat on the committee with Steve Panico and Joe Pasquarelli, former principal Jim Bryant, Peggy Suick, who kind of got that thing going. We never anticipated in later years that it would become such a magnet for the wrong kinds of things. And the new design is very much cognizant of trying to change the culture there a little bit. And we want to encourage parents with young kids to come and supervise their children. There are a couple of amenities for older children, but it's not, major focus is not for 13-year-olds.
No, it's not the 13-year-olds I'm worried about. It's the 15 to 19 partakers of other substance. But, and again, like I said, as my kids used to be younger, I didn't like to have to trek to other towns to take them to a playground to go goof around. When the one up off of West Street was built, that was a great improvement to the town that it was available for the kids in this town. This would make it even more convenient for people living on this side of town. It's just, again, its location, its reputation, whatever you do to clear the site and do whatever to make it less advantageous for
that. It has been addressed in the design. We have cap structures are gone. You'll see how open that space actually is. And on the backside, as you look in from Pierce Street towards where the cap was, we have kind of a rolling couple of hills there. And we don't plan on taking down any of the beautiful trees. We've had an arborist in already. Took down a few bigger, dangerous things that could fall, branches. But part of the proposal is to grub out the small stuff so that there'll be even more of a visual, clear sight lines into that back area. But there is a grade there that we can't eliminate. So you won't be able to see everything back there.
John, wait a minute. Peter first.
I want to thank you for the good work you do with all these fields, keeping them up. But in this particular field, as far as security goes, I don't go up there that often, but the Christmas lights and parade, I parked out on the other side of Park Street and I walked through the Kimball School there. And then I found out there's 2 pathways. One's a walkway that's paved. The other one's close to the property line that goes through a wooded area. And if you're going to have some kind of cameras for security, I think that whole wooded area for the pathway should be security cameras there, because there's a lot of, I feel a lot of horror stories that goes on up in that area.
Yeah.
Not just, kids doing drugs, but other things. And then
No, you're right.
There's a lot of problem I noticed, like on weekends, people come there and have big barbecues, and some of them, I don't even think live in Stoughton. When they leave, they just throw the trash all over the place. But, it's hard to control that. But the other one question I have, I'm going through your book here, and You got 3 wooden logs for kids stepping logs. Is that real wood, or is that made of some kind of composite?
No, it's a composite material. All those playground structures, they give you this faux look-alike, you know, rock look-alike and so forth, but it's composite material.
Oh, geez, to me, I don't know, it seems like some of these prices are way over.
Playground equipment, if you're having sticker shock, I had it first because when and I think the Community Preservation Committee had some. Playground equipment is incredibly expensive. In my humble opinion, it's vastly overpriced, but the truth is, that's what it costs. And the lion's share of the price of this playground isn't even in the playground equipment. This poured-in-place surface that we propose underneath the, if I might, the poured-in-place surface that we propose in the tot lot area, the poured-in-place surface is that rubberized solid surface, and that is very expensive, but it's not just the poured-in-place surface, it is the grading and the subsurfaces underneath to assure proper drainage. So, and to go back to one of your other questions, your comment, there is an existing pathway to the back of the park. This pathway comes down to the Jones School parking lot, and in our design, we do propose to connect walkways down to it, and as part of this proposal, there is lighting along this pathway.
No, the pathways I was talking about go to the old Kimball School. One's a paved walkway, then there's another one that goes through the woods. It's just a clear path.
All right, well,
but it's close to the property line, and it's kind of, you know, a dark area.
This is the paved, I believe this is the paved path that you refer to down to the...
It goes back to the Kimball School?
The Kimball School.
Parking lot,
Yeah,
okay.
parking lot,
Yeah.
exactly, which we propose to connect. We have a lot of adult users out here, walkers, and we very much want to appeal to them as well. We see it as a public park, not just, you know, the current users who use it properly, we want to encourage them to extend their walk and utilize the playground area as well. And we want to encourage that by better lighting this back side. So that will be lit under this proposal.
Yeah, but I don't think you addressed the pathway that I'm talking about. It's closer to the fence. Like if you're at Helen Park looking towards the Kimball School walk, you got the paved walkway, and then to the left of that, there's just a clear path going through the wooded area. That's the one I think that needs to be lit up and with security cameras.
I think I know where you're talking about, and that pathway, I think, is just, that pathway has occurred because of, yeah, the illicit use of that pathway by the wrong element. I don't know if we can, in any viable way, I mean, we can look into another security camera. I'd have to see how much that would cost. And I'd see where that could be located. We do have light poles in the circular area up in the park. And if one could be mounted up there, pointing down and into that area, that might help.
Well, I think it's important if you're inviting kids there, you got to give them a secure place to
I understand.
walk. Okay. And, well, I'm just dumbfounded by some of these prices. He is a swing set that's made of straight piping or some kind of composite for $3,200 almost. It doesn't look like there's $300 worth of material.
I agree. I
All right.
agree.
Thank you.
A quick question. So the park will be lit, well lit at night?
Well, within the structure of what we do now, we don't light it all night long. out of respect to neighbors on both sides. Pear Street, Leach, and then on the other side, people whose backyards off of Park Street back up to the park. The lighting is, we turn the lights off at about 9:30, so the park is in essence closed. We have security lights on permanently on the playground pieces. Those are 2 floodlights, and those would remain on. But to light the entire walkway area all night long, 365 days a year, I'd need a lighting budget like the Public Works Department.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
I just want to say, I think this is an excellent idea. You're just taking me back. I got my start at the Hanson School PTO, and I don't remember if I was president, grant writer, what I was at the time when we tried to expand the playground. And we had to raise $23,000, which was a lot of money for the Hanson PTO, just for, I'm trying to remember, a slide, a bench, and maybe a little bit of fencing and all the new, I forget what it was called, whatever the surfacing chips we used at the time, but it was just a phenomenal amount of money for very little bit. So I just want to say, just from my experience with that project, this just doesn't surprise me.
I would say that in working with community preservation, and I really appreciate what they do and the demands on their limited funds. I'm also cognizant of there are 5 other school playgrounds in Stoughton, and then the Lesser Memorial Playground, which is not on school property, but is on recreation property. At some point in time, those playgrounds will need renovation, and they can now qualify under CPC funds. CPC has a commitment to other open space properties, namely Glen Echo and Cape and Reynolds, both of which are entering the study master plan phase, and both of those properties I would think will come back for CPC funding as well. So what we've tried to do as much as I could is keep a balance between, kind of a delicate balance between what this park and what the neighbors, given its history, what it can tolerate in terms of use and activity, but also keep a balance and keep in mind future demands on CPC funds for other recreational development in the town of Stoughton. And it's coming.
Other questions? Eddie, and then...
I'll be brief. David Asak, Precinct 1 Town Meeting Member, Rep. I think the vast majority of people who use these kinds of facilities are law-abiding. I think it's a terrible invasion to tape them. I'm not even sure they're going to know that we're taping them. Do you really think the residents of this town want you watching them while they're playing with their kids? We're going to go down a road here. Where we're going to be in 10 or 20 years, you're going to tape everything that we do. Please, let's not set that precedent.
What did he say? He doesn't want security cameras.
It's for the benefit of kids.
Ed, and then Paul?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember when the project was first initiated as CAP, I think it was, John, if I'm not mistaken, around 1985, I think, in that vicinity.
87.
87, close. A lot of us donated our time and equipment, and a lot of the labor basically was put in by residents of the town. And I think there's any number of people here that I remember working with down there. I think it's really a shame that we can't do that again. And I understand there's some liability questions, but I'm wondering why couldn't the town just take out an insurance policy for a week or 2 or whatever it would take to do it, and try to get help like we did before. And there were people that brought the equipment in, there were the professional, so to speak, and the rest of us brought our equipment and our hands and whatever. It would be nice if we could do something like that. That would reduce the cost and, you know, have, like, as we did back then, and I think you probably remember, Scott, too, that a lot of us put, you know, a lot of skin in the game, and it lasted quite a while. So this is a step up. It's going to be better. It's, and it, you know, we should keep it there. And the question on the security, I understand what David's saying, and it gets to the point where people are afraid to go outside. One of the things I think what you have to hope for here is that you get this project going and done, you know, the parents in this town are going to have to step up. You can't be just dropping your kids off and let them walk through that path on a company, as Peter mentioned. Parents got to step up. They got to go and watch their kids and help, you know, and be in a community, interact with other parents. And if the parents are there or available, a lot of these other things aren't going to be smoked or whatever in that vicinity. And the idea that John has, I think, is great about extending the walking paths, because then that's going to bring some adults through this area. So we kind of have to work as a community also to keep ourselves safe, and it's not necessarily, don't forget, a camera is something that's going to be reviewed after something happens. So, and I'm sure the police department will do their best as far as cruising by, or perhaps maybe they would even walk through the project or whatever like that. So overall, I understand what Peter said. It is an expensive project. Perhaps we could get some free labor as we did last time. And if it took a short-term policy to cover liability, why don't we look at it? Thank you.
John, did you mention that you were looking to have some community support down there for some assistance?
I did not.
Okay.
My feeling, I felt kind of strongly about that. It worked in 1987. It was a different structure with a different company. And the surfaces we used and the grades, we really didn't touch. With this proposal, it's part playground, it's part park extension, and I'm not saying there aren't talented people in the community who could do some of the grading and so forth. There's some more asphalt work here, and the poured-in-place surface really can only be done by a qualified contractor.
I was thinking more in terms of
it's pretty
helping lift and move stuff, not
well,
doing
no,
the
that
actual
could
work.
be. And it gets a little tricky, though, when you blend contractor who is bid with volunteers. And I just feel much more comfortable, and I appreciate what Mr. DeFelice is saying. I truly do. And but in this very litigious society, having the professional installer install it, and they're responsible.
You could set up a community watch program. Mr. Smith?
Sit down. Sit down. Wait your turn. Paul Smith, Precinct 7. I have a couple of questions about the security cameras. Who's going to monitor them?
The security camera will be wired through the fiber optic network to the police department only.
So the police department are going to be watching those cameras?
The police
24 hours a
department
day?
will, by computer, will be able to go on and review activity at the police station.
How is that cost going to be absorbed? There is a
So
cost there.
the cameras are a cost part of the project, and the network's
Well, the monitoring, there's a cost too. You're talking about a policeman sitting watching a computer.
You're not planning on
right?
staffing an additional officer for this, no.
That hasn't been,
It's just gonna be in the dispatch area.
No, well, just for some clarity, security cameras, we have them in our schools, and they're in other places in town, I believe. Nobody sits and watches them in real time. They use them when a situation occurs, and they can
So
track
so
back
they're on a recording loop?
and find something that happened and try to find out the perpetrator, find evidence on tape. So, police
They
department
won't- they
tells
won't
me
be
that the
monitored?
biggest advantage to this is that they are a deterrent. People know they're there, they avoid the bad behavior.
So they won't be monitored in real time?
No.
Okay.
Was there, yeah, we had a question back here.
They answered the question. Thank you.
My name is Bill Moat, Precinct 7, and I was on the Municipal Operations Committee last year that recommended we fund the study for this. A few questions. What is the target age group for the playground?
Playground has pieces for ages 2 through 12. The circular area that will has the poured-in-place surface is mostly tot lot structures, and then below that we'll have the Cascade Columbia slide, a dual big slide that kind of mimics what we had on the Cap playground. That was the one thing that most people said we still need a big slide. The modern big slide, though, is at grade level, so if you fall off, you don't really fall, but it's still steep.
So
About a 16-foot slide. And then there's a 3-bay, 6-swing set for older children. There's a tot swing set in the tot lot. So a couple of pieces for the older kids and 4 or 5 pieces for the tots.
And what process did you use to decide what the target age was going to be for the playground?
Well, that's a good question. That process really involved our experience with the neighborhood, what goes on, some of the issues we've had with the CAP, discussions with the police department, juvenile officers, and our youth commission folks, Stephanie Patton at Oasis and others. And also some kind of clear understanding that when we built Children's Adventure Play Space project, it was the only playground in Stoughton. The elementary schools actually did not have playgrounds as we understand them now. Now there are 6 other playgrounds in Stoughton, one at each of the 5 elementaries and the lesser playground down on West Street. So with all those issues kind of combined, and also discussions and meetings with the neighborhood folks and abutters, we came to kind of that more limited scope of a playground, but it still addresses children from ages 2 through 12, but not to a huge, it's not going to be a massive, grand playground structure.
It seems like about 75% of your structure is aimed at the 2 to 5-year-old set.
That's about right.
And demographics, what did you consult? Census figures?
No, we understand that we have probably a greater population of older children. The Cap Playground or the Halloran Park is the one park that's open, and one playground besides the lesser playground on West Street that would be open when school is in session. School-age children, there are playgrounds at each of the elementaries, so we felt that they were fairly well served. If you have tots or a tot, there were very few places in Stoughton you could go when school was in session, and Halloran Park and the playground there would be available during school hours. So that was part of our thinking.
Well, my concern, the concern of many parents I've spoken with, is that it seems like this design is pretty much, for the most part, ignored anyone over the age of 5. There are many, many, many children, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, that go to this park with their parents. They are not the root of the problem. The teenagers, the young adults at night are the root of your problem. They're the ones leaving the hypodermic needles there, not the 8-year-olds, not the 10-year-olds. We need more structures at this park for those children. Those children come with their younger siblings. It has been suggested to members of this town that we could go back and fund this later on. We never do that. We built a police station that needed to be replaced the day it opened. We built a fire station that did not work the day it opened. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. I say no this year. This isn't done right. The intentions are there, they're great, they're well-meaning. We haven't done it right.
Other questions or comments? Okay, up in the back, yep.
Heidi Tucker, Precinct 8, mother of 2, active mother in the Moms Club of Stoughton. I have gone to the meeting that was held last week revealing the final draft of this park. I've always heard that they were going to do something with the park, and then I never heard about any meetings. And then went for a walk with some friends, and one of my friends said, I just have to let you know before we go over to Halloran and to Cap that they already took it down, which was a surprise. I understand for liabilities, it was something that needed to happen right away, and I appreciate that and I respect that. I had a difficult time with the process of how this was taken care of. When I went to the meeting, I started buying into the rationale and the reason why the park is structured the way it is. However, my oldest child is going to be aging out of using this park when it opens. When you have a structure that says ages 2 to 5, when my daughter was 2, she was playing on the 5+ structure. There's not going to be anything here for my 5-year-old. My 2-year-old loves to climb. There are a couple structures here that she can climb on in the circle, and I think that's great. I think of what was built in '87, and it was this big grand thing. And so my expectation was that another big grand thing was going to be built. And so when this was revealed to me, I was really disappointed because in my head, Stoughton was going to have their own imagination station that Randolph has built for their young people. There's a structure, a tall structure for older kids, a smaller structure on the other side of the park for younger kids. When I bring both my girls there, the line of sight and the visual line of sight is such that I can see both of my girls at the same time. So when I'm with the little one, I can see the big one. This park offers a slide and a swing for my older daughter, who is going to need more than that to be exhausted. And so the design of this, although I think well-intended, I don't think is suitable for me and my family and the needs that we have. And in talking with other moms in the area, happy that the cap is gone because of the safety, security, et cetera. However, a lot of people are not pleased with this particular design. Do we need a new playground? Yes. Do we need to make sure that it's safe for our young people and not a beacon for bad behavior? Yes, we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. I'm not convinced that this design is the solution.
Any other comments? Okay. Moving on. Item last. Article 57. CPC Historic Preservation Grant for State Theater. John, thank you. And welcome, John. Mr. Stagnoni?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us here.
Actually, in that warrant article is on page 52 on the warrant, if anybody was looking for it. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, everybody should have received hopefully a copy of a packet that we submitted to you. Just to give you a brief background on the Friends of the State Theater, this is a private corporation, and it's formed as a nonprofit corporation, currently served by a board of directors of 9 Stoughton residents, and we also have a community citizens group that assists us, and for a total of almost 30 people on that committee as well. So, you know, the community is involved and engaged, and we have been moving forward with our plans and trying to do two things here, is preserve part of the town's history. The theater was opened in 1927, has been part of the downtown, operational for the past 80 years. It's been closed for the last 6 years. It closed in 2007 in December. And part of what you see on the front cover is what the theater looked like when it originally opened, and what we're looking to bring it back to be. This current picture here that we show is a painting that was recently done by a preservation architect that we had hired. We also have some other venues, paintings of the interior, but we're not releasing those at this time. I can tell the committee and the residents that our intent is to make this a very nice theater and make it a destination where folks will hopefully be coming from throughout the South Shore and beyond. We're looking to make this a multicultural facility. It's not just going to be a movie house, so it'll be doing theater, live entertainment, bands, and all sorts of things, and hopefully open it up for some other community theater as well. So, on the next page you'll see that some things from the Americans of Arts, 10 reasons to support the arts. Part of our course of funding, besides CPC funding, the grant application that we currently have with them and received unanimous support of the CPC committee, and as well as unanimous support of the Historical Commission, was we're going after mass cultural grants, and we're going to go for federal grants and other funding sources. And all these agencies in state and federal levels support theater because of a lot of the things, these 10 reasons. The prosperity, the arts will help express the values, build bridges between cultures, and bring us together regardless of the ethnicity and religion of age. Improve academic performance in students. I think we've all heard it in Stoughton. As a great example of it is our music and programs in this town are you know, above and beyond any others. Our students win multiple awards every year on all categories, and the talent is phenomenal within this town. And unfortunately, they have no other venue besides within the high school as the auditorium to perform, and hopefully we'll be able to bring some of that back for them. The other important thing is the economic piece. As I said, you know, we're looking to preserve part of the town's history, but we're also doing this as trying to revitalize the downtown. And one of the things arts venues does do is bring in additional money to other businesses within the downtown, such as restaurants, maybe some other related arts galleries or whatever else that may come in, depending on, you know, based on the venues we put together. As everybody knows, our downtown is in pretty tough shape. It's in need of an economic lift. If anybody's been going to the master plan meetings that have been going on, the downtown is #1 priority. And most people have said that, you know, they would like to see the theater brought back as well. So there seems to be a lot of support for the theater. There's a lot of, the theater is not the answer to everything. But all you do is look at the apartments behind here and any future project. It's hard to get tenants to come into the downtown because essentially there's nothing for them to move into. You know, the younger group or younger families that you want to bring into this downtown who would take the train to work and things, there's nothing we offer them within walking distance of the downtown. So there's no incentive for them to do that, and there's no incentive really for businesses to invest in our downtown. So we're hoping that this will be, you know, a beginning, And that's another reason, you know, that's a way of getting some of the payback on the investment, hopefully, if the town meeting goes and supports this article. The other thing is, you know, you talk about building a 21st century schools and education for the kids. You're still talking about the same thing, but at your workforce levels, a lot of the businesses are looking at this as they look at their employees who are interested in arts and done arts because it's the creativity that comes out of people that have been in the arts. And also, number 9 is the stronger communities. The University of Pennsylvania research has demonstrated that a high concentration of arts in city leads to higher civic engagements, more social cohesion, higher child welfare, and lower poverty rates. Vibrant arts ensures that young people are not left to be raised solely in a pop cultural tabloid marketplace. So hopefully we'd be giving our kids someplace else to go besides home and playing video games or whatever. I think also you've heard it at other meetings that, you know, there may be some other youth things coming up, maybe in the Armory or whatever. And all these discussions are coming about because we really don't have anything for our youths to go to after school and things. So, so that was some of the other things. Percentages, again, the next page is, just giving you statistics on the arts and the culturals throughout the country and the benefits to the economy in itself. And the following page talks more about the economics impact of nonprofit art industries. And the total spending of arts organization is $61.1 billion, and total spending by nonprofit arts audiences was $74.1 billion. So we're in the middle of our business plan, and right now our projected budget is between $700,000 and $800,000 a year, and that is, obviously a business in the downtown generating that type of business and pushing out that type of revenue, buying services and everything else to other businesses is going to help the economy, hopefully not just in our downtown, but in the surrounding towns as well. We've included in the packet is a series of support letters. The first one being from the Greater Boston Convention and Visitor Centers. The list is very extensive. The only one within this packet, because I don't want anybody to think I was trying to mislead them, that supports the request currently is the Historical Commission and the CPC Committee, obviously, who have voted on this. All these letters are in support of our Mass Cultural Council grant, but also, which in turn is in support of the theater, preserving the theater as a whole. So you have your state senators, our state representatives, our congressmen, the Board of Selectmen, both of our regional planning councils, Old Colony Planning Council and the MAPC are in support. The Master Planning Committee is in support of the theater. You got the Planning Board, and then you got the Stoughton Schools, Southeastern Regional Schools, and the Historical Commission, the YMCA, IKEA, and then Stoughton businesses, the Stoughton Chamber of Commerce, Stoughton Little Theater, and then some individual residences and other businesses. In recent months, people may have seen a number of articles on the State Theater. Recently, just a couple of weeks ago, we were in the Stoughton Journal. We've had articles in the Boston Globe, New England Real Estate Journal. We're going to be there's going to be a small article in McGraw-Hill Construction. We've also been should be in the Enterprise as well as other local papers. We basically trying to do, like I said, is two pieces here, is preservation and revitalization. In the last piece that we have included in here at the back is a draft warrant article, or it is the warrant article that we are bringing forward. The language in this warrant article was drafted between myself and the CPC committee, and this is what we agreed to, is the language and the amounts and how everything would be triggered. And you'll notice in here that we are required to have a 3-to-1 match, just like all the other projects. And this would be, until all the money is raised, the town's funds would not be looked to be had. And there's also there would be an agreement between the town and the Friends of the State Theater that would be also in place before any monies could be taken. So at this time, Mr. Chairman, that's it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the boards have.
Pat, then John?
I have a couple of questions. I want to understand just the big picture in terms of the players and the costs, but I just want to start with just a quick comment. I go to the Dedham Theater sometimes, and I love it because it's a little community theater, but when I go, the restaurants are packed. And just, it's a little teeny thing, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but they have real butter in a crock pot. And that doesn't sound like anything, but it's a hook. And sometimes if we're trying to decide, oh, where should we go to the movies, it's like, oh, wow, that butter in the crock pot sounds good. So it's just a little hook that they have, but I know my family's gone over there quite a bit, and it really has revitalized downtown Dedham immensely. But I just want to understand, if I could, just the total players and the cost, because I'm just not clear in my head. The theater is owned by just an individual, correct?
It's owned by a family, which is an investment group right now, set up as its C&B Realty Investment.
Okay, so it's
Is it a
owned?
separate building, John, completely separate?
No, C&B
attached.
Realty Investment Group owns a block within the downtown. It goes from the upholstery store all the way down to Railroad Ave.
So how does the Friends of the Theater, I just don't understand how it meshes together. This is a group that's raising money to revitalize the theater, but the theater is owned by a separate entity. So I guess I'm just not clear. You could be doing all this work, raising all this money, doing renovations, but you don't have any ownership stake in it. So help me understand how the two
Okay,
mesh.
yeah, and I'm sorry, because I did leave that off as part of the presentation. The Friends of the State Theater currently has a 30-year lease with the C&B Investment. We have 20 years, the first 20 years is rent-free, which is a value over $2 million at current market rates. And we also have a 10-year option. The bigger thing for us is, and we've already talked to the owners, and the owners actually approached us a while back, is about purchasing the property. It is our full intent to purchase, so the lease would become non-issue at that point. But we are our talks have been to purchase the facility to the right and to the left of the theater, is, you know, the owners indicated they may be interested in selling the whole block to us as well. So, but at a minimum, we need those 3 spaces, and we've already had discussions, and and part of our financing and to raise the amount of money to do the renovation is going to be we're going to be looking to go after what's called new market tax credits and historical tax credits, which is at the state and federal levels. That would allow us to 20% on each of the historical and state, and new market, if we're eligible for it, would also get us a 20% tax credit. And that could raise us up to about $2.5 million by just those 3 entities.
Okay, so for 20 years at least, you have a lease, 10-year option, and then you could purchase. So we don't have to worry about the owner.
Yeah, we have a 30-year lease, 20 of it's rent-free, the first 20 are rent-free. So, and then we have a 10-year option. So we're at a minimum, no matter if we bought it or somebody else bought it, that they're buying a lease that is in writing for 40 years. We have an option for 40 years.
Could they sell that, and then the lease is null
Well,
and
the
void?
leases, it would be bought by the owners as is. It's not, whoever buys the property buys the lease.
Okay.
And, you know, and a lease like this obviously makes it less attractive for somebody else to buy, except for us. Also, we have first right to purchase within our lease, whether they put it up for sale or if they run into financial trouble. We have it written in 2 different manners that we would have the first right to purchase.
So then just help me understand just the cost and how that works. You're asking for $500,000 for the with the architectural design. What is the total cost of renovating the theater? I'm trying to understand what this is in terms of the stages and in terms of the total cost.
Well, we really probably don't have an actual on the total cost, because one is, as soon as you get into it, we're also looking at preservation and not just going in and patching the walls and painting them. As I alluded to, we have 2 additional paintings. We bought the original blueprints from the state archives, and the State Theater, when it was originally opened, was what's called an atmospheric theater. Basically, it was a scene from maybe a city in Italy or whatever, and it made you feel like you were outdoors while you were inside the theater. We are looking to bring that type of atmosphere back, and that's why we are saying, we're saying that this will be a destination theater, and people will be coming hopefully from throughout the South Shore and beyond. So we don't have a figure. It's above $5 million, I can tell you. But I've been avoiding saying what a figure, and so anybody would try to hold us to it. But it's more than $5 million at this point. So $500,000 is to try to show. One of the things we just did is we filed for a Mass Cultural Facilities Fund grant.
So that's for the $1 million?
And that was for $1 million, and that requires matching funds, and it also requires us to show that there's community support. The letters are one thing, but also, having some funding would be another great way of showing community support.
So you'd have to do some fundraising also to get the matching funds for that?
Absolutely.
And what does it mean in here when, in the actual article itself, it says, to see if the town will vote to approve subject to the recommendations of the Community Preservation Committee by way of a dollar-for-dollar matching grant? What does that mean? So you're asking for $500 from CPC, and you'll match the $500 there as well?
Where are you reading that from?
Right in the article on page 52, Article 57. It says,
not
in the
this one,
warrant.
in the warrant.
In the warrant.
Oh, the warrant.
Yeah, it says, again, to see if the town will vote to approve, subject to the recommendation of the Community Preservation Committee by way of a dollar-for-dollar matching grant.
Yeah, that was the language that we had used when we went out and got signatures. And the motion is what I gave you. And basically, it's going to be a 3-to-1 match, is what the CPC committee and we agreed to.
So you're looking for $500 from the CPC, and you're looking to then match it with, what, 1.5?
We'd have to raise 1.5 before we could leverage the town funds. And as I said, just like the other projects, the town funds would be the last ones to come in. And if we don't raise the funds to finish the project, then we will not begin the project, and we will not execute looking for the funds.
Last question. When do you have any anticipation, like how many years we're talking? Like when we would actually have the theater?
Right now, our goal is set to start construction September of 2015.
Wow.
And it's going to be just under 2 years of renovations.
Okay, thank you.
Joe?
Yeah, a couple of things though. You said that you're hoping people would come from all around the South Shore. Where are they going to park?
Good question.
Well, as I said, the theater's been here for 80 years. It's sold out. People's never had a problem.
Yeah, but that was totally different. I mean, you didn't have all the population south of us or what have you. I mean, people drive, there's a lot more cars on the road today.
Yeah, we don't have any more seats than what's been there all the time. So, like I said, people have no problem. My wife and I have been going to the Norwood Theater since it's reopened. They have similar parking as we do. They sell out. They don't have, people find a place to park. Mostly it's the railroad station, parking that they're using. There's plenty of parking. There's 500 and something parking spots in the downtown. People just perceive that there's a parking problem, and it's not as bad as you would think.
Do you know how many seats you're going to have in this structure when you're completed, or?
Currently, there's 650 seats within the theater, so we will not be adding any additional. We'll probably be losing some because of the size of the seats. The requirements today for the seating is a little different.
One more question, if you don't mind. How about like refreshments? I mean, will you be serving any kind of a actual food, or just like soda and popcorn type of deal?
It would be, right now, there would be some light type hors d'oeuvre type things or whatever, nothing, you know, we're not looking to put a restaurant or anything inside there. So, but, you know, there would be some type of concession stand foods and maybe some light hors d'oeuvres or something, but no, not a restaurant.
Thank you.
Mr. Malley?
So you briefly touched on that you're developing a business plan, but do you have one that in place? I mean, I guess what we're looking at is you're looking at maybe $5 million, so I assume you'll get a bunch of grants, but at some point you guys got to take out loans and things like that. Is there some kind of projections of revenue versus expensive that we could look at to feel like this seems like a viable thing going forward? I mean, I hate to see us put, you know, 500,000 in and, you know, get all the other grants and then find out it's really just not,
Again,
just nothing to support it.
The town's money is the last one in, and if we don't raise the money to do the project, we will not be going forward.
Right. But is there a
So-
business plan you could share with the people when they're voting? Because they want to, I think people are going to want to see that this can work. And
When the business plan is
you
done,
don't actually have a
we have to
figure.
return to the CPC committee with it, and we're gonna be meeting with them again.
Okay, good. No, you just didn't really have an even real figure for what it's going to cost, so that makes people a little worried as far as if we don't even know what it's going to cost, that there's not a full plan out there that we're going to.
Well, like I
get
said,
money for.
every time you say there's a cost, everybody tries to hold you right to it. And, you know, it's a moving target when you get into a historical building like this, and you never know what you're gonna run into. So we're trying to foresee for every problem that you could possibly run into. And again, it's a preservation project, and they just cost a lot more than, you know, just painting the walls.
My fellow CPC members can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was agreed that a business plan would be forthcoming before town meeting, or CPC might withdraw its approval.
Okay, that's what we'd like to see, I think, yeah. It's just so we have something to put our hands on and understand the project a little better and understand the potential revenue and expenses down the road. That's all.
Peter, and then Barbara, and then Roberta, but quick question up front. If all this money goes into it and the venture doesn't succeed, what happens? The owner gets all those improvements and...
Well, again, our intention is to purchase the building, and if the business plan for some reason comes back, which preliminary discussions I've had with the consultants that are done all the outreach to potential users of the theater and things, that the business plan will be a viable project, and it will be sustainable. It's gonna, you know, it's not gonna happen in the first year, but it is a viable project, and if we do things right, which we intend to do, this will be good for the community, and it'll be a good project.
Thanks, John. Peter?
All right, John, I have a lot of fond memories of that theater, because I spent a lot of Saturdays there. But that being said, I'm not too crazy about this, because there's a three-way partnership here. The owner of the building, the nonprofit, and the town of Stoughton. And I don't think the town of Stoughton should be putting up the money first, even though he can't touch that 500,000 until he gets $1 million or $1.5 million. But someplace down the line, when it gets near the end, he needs another $1 million or something to finish that project, and the funds dry up. So he's gonna come back to the town and say, okay, I need this amount of money, then what are we gonna do? We already got $500,000 into it. We're just gonna kiss it goodbye, or we're gonna start throwing more money onto it.
What's that?
So I'm not too crazy about this. At the end, if he came for the money, I'd say okay, but coming right up front, no. And the other thing, getting back to Pat and John, they both go to theaters in different towns. I'm sure them theaters are not as big as Stoughton Theater.
Actually, Norwood has more seats than Stoughton's.
Pardon?
Norwood has more seats than Stoughton.
Yeah, but is the structure as big as this, as ours?
Absolutely. It was,
Well, I gotta see that. I know the one in Dedham, not that big.
They have over 700 seats in their theater.
So so you're gonna survive on movies alone?
No, that's what that's what
Okay. So, I mentioned this once before, on another hearing,
I go to
Acorn
the
Park,
Theater a lot.
over in Norwell.
It's a nice
I go over there every once in a while to watch plays.
but it's,
And that's a fairly new building, maybe 25 years old or 30 the most. And it's a small structure, and they've gone belly up 3 or 4 times. So, you know what I mean? So it's a tough business.
And that's why we're a nonprofit. Part of the business plan is, you know, that ticket sales aren't
Yeah,
gonna cover the
okay,
whole
that's right.
thing.
You're not nonprofit, but sometime down the line, from the starting date to the finish date, you might be back looking for more CPC money. That's what I'm not too crazy about. The money was, you ask for the money at the end, to finish it, I'd say, okay.
I take your point here, but the money's not exactly up front. The money comes in after $1.5 million.
After he gets $1.5 million, yeah, but it's gonna cost $5 million or more, so down the line, he runs out of funds. Now he's gonna come back to the town looking for more money, and what are we gonna say?
And again,
No, or we're gonna throw money in, because we already got $500,000 into this venture, this three-way
and
partnership.
again, Peter, as I said probably a couple of times already, is we are not, unless we raise enough money, we're not starting the construction project.
Yeah, but you're not gonna raise $5 million before you start.
We will be raising the money to do the project. If we can't, then we're not starting the construction.
Let me see that picture.
Barbara?
Okay, just kind of along that line, there's the goal of restoring it to its former glory. Is there a plan B where you can restore it to, hey, I'm opened, and then we can at least start generating some revenue, and then you can take the money to the glory days? Is that your plan, or are you gonna, it's all or nothing?
Well, right now, the way we're looking at it, it's to bring it back to its glory days, the way it was. And to become eligible for the historical tax credits, and as I said, that's worth a couple of $1 million in the new market tax credits, we have to do that. It adds cost to the project, but it also brings us in revenue. But without doing the preservation piece and making it much nicer theater than just walls, I don't think you won't get the attraction that we would get by doing the preservation part of it. And people, I don't think people would come to you don't get the same atmosphere, you don't get the same feel for the night out if you just paid 4 walls. So, but that's why we're looking, is to try to bring it, one is, the historical piece, and then to try to bring back its thing, and then it's to try to make this a destination theater, not just because of the shows, but because of the theater in itself.
Okay, so it's all or nothing. All right, my second question, because I'm apparently don't know this, I don't understand tax credit, because to me a tax credit means I'm not paying my taxes, but you seem to be using it in a different way. So what do you mean by tax credit?
We have a meeting coming up. There's entities that will, it's actually pretty complicated, and that's why I gotta have a sit down with the company that's gonna be working with us. Essentially, we set up a for-profit corporation, and there's a bunch of legal things you gotta go through, and then there's entities like the big corporations, the mobiles and things, who will buy these tax credits, typically like 90 cents on the dollar, and they pay us the money, and they save the money on the taxes at the end or something like that. So it's just an incentive for people to invest in these type of things. It saves the corporations money, and it also generates money for us. Because I was trying to understand it, because we're a nonprofit, we don't pay taxes, how it all worked. So we do have a meeting coming up with the consultant who's working with us on that piece of it, because we're gonna start that part of the process moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Camacho?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several questions. Your lease, it's with C&V Realty. Is it a Bow family, I believe it is?
No.
Who is the what is the name of the, who are the principals of this realty trust?
Kevin Vane is the trustee.
All right, you have a lease for a you have a lease which is not going to cost anything for 20 years, and then you have a lease for 10 years.
We have 30 years, the first 20 being rent-free, and then after the 30 years are up, we have an option for another 10. So
All right. You said that it would cost you, how much during the first 20 years, did you think?
well, the first 20 is zero, but the value at the current rates, at during the master plan, they said the average downtown was like $10.50 a square foot for rent. That would equate to over $2 million in rent. And that's what the owners are basically putting in, should we not purchase the building. But, like I said, our intent is to purchase the building anyways.
So your rent is about $16,000 a month. That's what
The
supposedly.
value could, yeah,
That's the value of the rent for that space.
that at $10.50 a square foot, yeah.
All right. Now, what I want to know is, what is the escape clause that the trust has? Every landlord has an escape clause. What's the one in your lease? Because we don't have a copy of the lease.
The only thing that can, if we don't pay the rent, which is zero, and that we don't raise and finish the project within 7 years.
Oh, so now we're entering into the 7-year department, which we didn't talk about before.
Well, we
You
have
have to
we have
finish-
5 years to raise the money and 2 years for construction.
2 years for construction.
Yeah.
So now the answer to the question is, when do you expect to finish the project is 7 years?
Our anticipation is to start construction September of 2015, as I mentioned earlier.
But my question is, in your statement that you just made, you intend to finish the project within 7 years, is that correct?
Our intention is to finish it before 7 years, yes.
Before 7 years?
Yep.
All right. Now, you have a 501c3 corporation?
Yes, we do.
All right, nonprofit? And how many members on the board of directors?
9.
9 members? Do the members of the board of directors draw a salary?
Nobody is compensated.
Is there any compensation going to be in the future?
Is not anticipated, no.
So in other words, for all of these years, all the members of the board of directors are going to work for nothing?
That is the intent. That's
Alright.
what I've been doing, and that's what I don't plan on taking any salary.
And where has the money been coming from in order to hire all these consultants that you talked to us about?
The first set money came to set up the corporation, and all the 501c3 paperwork I had done, and my wife and I paid for. The consultant that we hired for the Mass Cultural Grant, my wife and I loaned the corporation the money. The state representatives, Kafka and Galvin, had $50,000 put in the state budget, and Senator Joyce took it through the Senate, and we've been using that $50,000 to hire to do the business plan and to do the renderings, and we still have a little bit of money left out of that $50,000.
So you've already accessed $100,000 in state money?
50,000.
I thought you told me 50,000 for one thing and then 50,000 for the other.
No, there was 50,000 in the state budget, and so far we've used money for the paintings and for the business plan, and we still have some money left over of that $50,000.
All right, so why are you here looking for this amount of money, $500,000, when in fact you cannot access that $500,000 from the Community Preservation Committee until such time as the trigger is pulled and you have raised $1.5 million?
The reason is that the Mass Cultural Grant requires us to show that there's community support. So there is, in addition to letters, this is just another way of showing community support. When we go out and we go to corporations, foundations, federal grants, and other grants, all which are usually matching grants. It would be nice to show that the community is behind it, and that it'll help us towards our match with Mass Cultural Council. We had requested $1 million. This 500,000 would get us almost to 50% of that match.
Wouldn't a vote at town meeting that we are behind your project? Let's say if the town meeting votes that without a $500,000 price tag, do exactly the same thing. You have a whole portfolio full of letters that support your project from various organizations.
I don't have anything in front of town meeting that would allow us to do that. And I'm not sure if it would do the same thing or have the same impact as you go out to other people looking for funds.
Well, it could say that you would be getting the funding once you raise the 1.5.
I guess it's...
The part here where the restaurant was, now, this is the State Theater here.
Yeah, right over the
All right,
marquee
but
is the main
are
entrance.
you going to be accessing this part here where the restaurant was?
Yes, that is, our intention is to purchase the left side, which is the restaurant side, and the storefront to the right, at a minimum, if not the whole block.
Well, when did that come into the discussion tonight? That didn't come into the discussion tonight about purchasing those pieces.
Yeah, it was part of my presentation.
Yeah, he did.
He mentioned it. He mentioned
I
it.
didn't hear that part, I'm sorry. I apologize for that.
And I guess, just for Ms. Camacho, is the reason for that is because the current square footage of the theater does not allow us the space to bring the building up to code for ADA compliance, bathrooms and things of that nature. The code has changed significantly. The facilities requirements is a lot more extensive, and there's just no place within the building itself without going to the left and the right to make that a feasible project.
I see. All right. I am opposed to this particular article, and the reason I'm opposed to it is because we would be, although I know it is legal, we would be investing significant funds, $500,000 of money which has been accrued through the community preservation grant funds. It's public monies. I do not believe that public money should be spent on private projects. And that's my objection to it. I think also that you should have waited and come later on. Once you knew that, once you had a business plan, if you had the lease in front of you, I would like to see the lease, because a lease is a very technical document.
Yeah,
We don't know what's in that lease.
I can get you
You
a
want
copy
us
of
to,
the lease.
you want us to put $500,000 up, and we don't know what the story is really behind all of this.
Yeah,
Are there any members of the Community Preservation Committee on your 9-member board of directors?
No.
No? That's not what the town website shows. The town website shows that there are some of the members of the Community Preservation Committee are also members of your board of directors.
Who would that be? Yeah.
Is that true?
Well, who would it be? You're saying that there are,
Well-
we're saying no, so I
Okay,
just need to know the names.
then maybe the town website and maybe your State Theater site should be redone. But it seemed to me as though there were a crossover of a few names.
There are none.
All right. I will not vote in favor of this article, and I will speak against this article. Thank you.
Next was Joe.
No, I'm all set.
Okay, John.
I want to commend you for getting involved in this. I realize there's risk involved and there's some town funds involved, but I think a community theater, arts center would bring back the center of town like probably no other business. You know, I go to the Dedham Theater, Community Theater, and then I usually go out to eat after that in Dedham. I've been to the Somerville Theater. I know it's probably a little different, but that's a fabulous place. I just think the arts have brought back other towns in Massachusetts where the center has died or industries have moved away. I'm thinking maybe of North Adams or, I think it's a wonderful idea and I think it's worth the risk. And I think the town needs to show some support here. There is some risk involved, but I think the reward greatly outweighs, the potential reward greatly outweighs any risk involved. So I thank you for doing this. And did the CPC
I
vote?
think your thinking reflects the thinking of the CPC.
Yeah,
Which
and the
Adam, almost
CPC
exactly as you
voted
have
to
stated.
approve this?
Yes, with the qualifications, and John Morton were here. John Morton has held his feet to the fire on a number of things and could be a lot more articulate about it, but the fact that he has to come up with a business plan that we have to see before town meeting, our approval of it is conditional on that. But our thinking is exactly what you said.
Yeah, I think having some community theater, maybe some art studios, et cetera, to me, that seems like almost the only viable way to bring back the center of town.
Yeah, and just a couple of other historical points is, in the 20s, there was over 20,000 of these type of theaters built, and there's roughly just over 200 and something still open and brought back. And theater does, it brings back to life. Like you said, this isn't gonna change the whole town, but what we're asking is consistent with, you know, everything we've heard through the master plan visioning, and the community plan itself about investing in the downtown and investing in our historical buildings and trying to get an economic impact out of it as well. So that's how the town will get some money back. Like I said, everything's pointing that our budget's gonna be a minimum of $700,000, and to bring that type of economy and business to the downtown only can help, you know. So, and I know, you know, as they looked at the train station and getting their tenant, I've talked to that tenant several times. I actually brought them to town. They keep asking, you know, what's happening with the theater. They're very interested, and they know how it will impact their business. And, you know, hopefully we'll be partnering with some of the other businesses. I just recently took a tour of Amelia's that's under construction, and, you know, all the businesses will hopefully be able to do some type of deal and encourage people to go to dinner beforehand. And then, like I said, you know, we have a great group of kids in this town, a lot of talent, and we're gonna try to find a way to make the theater open to a variety of venues, businesses all day long while the kids are in school, and multiple of things, senior program, you know, some senior things or whatever too. So there's just so many things that can be done, and there's you know, we're working on the programming piece of it as part of the business plan. We're working on an economic impact as part of it, and, you know, come to the CPC committee. We're expecting it mid-April, so we will have it before town meeting, and we will be able to talk to it at town meeting as well. And just to talk to the lease, you know, again, I'll supply it to the chairman. He can pass it around. The CPC committee has 3 attorneys on the board, and it's been vetted. And, you know, besides that, you know, we've had our own attorney draft it, and we actually went and talking at our first meeting, we met 3 times with the CPC committee. Based on their comments, the very first meetings out, we went and renegotiated the lease with the landlord, and made it a 30-year, or 40 years altogether, but 30 and 20. Originally, we only had 20. I can tell you, in talking to Mass Cultural Council, long-term lease is what they say they accept for people that apply for grants. 5 years was a long-term to them, because in the commercial business, a 5-year is, you know, is typical. When they said only long-term, I always thought 20 would be what they'd be looking for. So we believe we have all the bases covered, and I can't emphasize enough, our intention is to purchase this, and it's figured into our costs. So
One other thing, if you get the new market credit funds, you don't have to pay that back, right? If you meet certain conditions?
No, the new market tax credits is, in the historical tax credits work that you actually have to have the project finished, and that money won't show up for a while at the end. So we may carry short-term debt and pay it off, you know, with that money, and then use some of the other money as a capital for the first year's revenue as you try to build programming and get the things up, and so use that for funding. So, you know, so we're expecting to probably have some short-term debt, but, you know, ultimately we our goal is to raise all the funds and have no debt at the end of this. And that was kind of our vision from day one, is the way to make, this is only going to be viable is if there is no debt or very little debt. So.
Thank you.
Mr. Crimmins?
That over there.
Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Barry Crimmins, as a member of the Community Preservation Committee. I think the members are aware, and it was just alluded to by Dwight, but I just want to make sure if the Finance Committee members are not aware, the vote of the Community Preservation Committee was a much more elaborate and conditional vote than the petitioned article that I think was advertised for tonight's hearing, as it should be. And there was some confusion as far as the vote of the Community Preservation Committee getting into the warrant. But I believe, and the moderator's here, he can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the intent at town meeting will be that the Community Preservation endorsed article will be a substitute motion on the floor of town meeting for Article 57. So assuming that is the case, I just want to make sure the Finance Committee members are aware of that when it comes time for you folks to deliberate and vote on this. And I don't know if you have been provided with a copy of what the Community Preservation Committee actually voted on. I thought, Mr. Chairman, that our chairman had forwarded that to you. If not, we could certainly make sure you get that. Yeah.
They do have it, Barry.
Okay.
Right, so no, we hadn't, it was going to be a question because we're very interested in what the CPA did vote in the detail.
On the back page of this.
So we did not
That's
act.
the motion on the back page.
Right.
Does the motion reflect the CPC vote?
I have not seen what's on the back
It's
of
the
that.
motion that you wrote, John.
Oh,
That motion is what the CPC committee and we agreed to.
So what's here is what the substitute motion will be on the floor?
Correct.
Okay, we actually don't have a motion yet. But
No, but that, you know, that's written
This
up
will be the
as
motion.
the.
Motion for warrant article 57.
that will be your motion. Okay,
That is
so
it. And
we
that
shouldn't look to
was-
a separate
Thank you.
substitute. Okay.
And that's what we agreed to in the language.
Ed, did you have a question? Yep.
Yeah, within your lease, you say you have an option to purchase the building. Is there a price already assigned for the purchase?
There is not a price assigned. We're going by the appraised value.
When? Like now, today, or 5 years when you fix it all up, or
No, it's going to be before renovations.
before? And when in your first 20 years can you exercise the option?
The right to purchase is if they've decided to sell. As I said, we've already had discussions with them because they've already came to us and indicated that they want to sell. So, and for us to get the new market and the historical tax credits, we need to own the building. And our intent is to buy at least 3 pieces, if not the whole block. And there's advantages to owning the whole block, but there's also a price to owning the whole block.
And currently, the way that block's set up, you can just buy the theater, or you could buy are they all separate parcels, however it's structured?
They would have to be condoized if we only bought the 3.
Okay. All set. Roberta?
I have one last question. I guess to you, Mr. Chairman, and the moderator also is here, if you would allow.
Sure.
How are we having a hearing on an article when the motion that's going to go on the floor is going to be perhaps quite different than we're talking about tonight.
I think I just clarified that the motion that you have in your book is what the motion is.
The
It won't-
motion in the book here,
The handout that they gave
Uh,
to you tonight,
this one here.
that one there. Well, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's the one in the back of the packet.
It's at the very back of the handout that they had.
This is the one that came, draft motion for warrant Article 57. Is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
And it has crossed out at the bottom, and the town meeting is requested to approve the foregoing or take any other action relative thereto.
Okay?
That's it?
Yes.
So, we covered all of this tonight
I don't understand.
without seeing a lease. I don't think we had a complete hearing on the article.
We don't ever have motions at the time of the hearings. We have
understand.
motions on the article as presented. I think, unless I'm wrong on this, this is the motion that we would need to eventually put in the book. But we never have, or I should say, we rarely have motions at the time of a hearing.
I understand that, but the point is, there are things that are mentioned in here, in this article. This says motion. Unless I don't know how to read, it's M-O-T-I-O-N. The point is that there are things in here that are talked about, such as the lease agreement. We don't have the faintest clue about the lease agreement. And now we're told you'll provide it to us later on. But you want $500,000.
Again, I didn't
I
think you
don't
would.
get it.
I'm not sure what you would get out of seeing the lease, but I would be happy to provide it to you. We have nothing to hide. The motion, I thought, would cover everything. We've been through the Historical Commission, 2 meetings. We've been through the CPC Committee, 3 meetings. The lease has been vetted multiple times. I didn't think the Finance Committee they were looking at an appropriation. I didn't think they would need a lease. I'd be happy to provide it to you. But I didn't think there was a need to see the lease. If you want it, I will get it to you.
For $500,000, I think we ought to see a lease.
If you can get it to us as soon as you can, John.
Yep.
We'll be voting this week.
I will send it to you tonight or first thing in the morning.
Great. Mr. DeFelice. This is new information, right?
Mr. Chairman, all of this is probably a good idea to preserve the theater if possible. The biggest problem that I have, and a lot of people in this town have, is that the proposal would take money, taxpayers' money, and would put it in the hands of a private corporation, albeit a nonprofit, whose purpose is to satisfy a lease with another corporation. And as I remember going to a previous meeting, wasn't talked about tonight, but the nonprofit has to pay taxes to make improvements along the way as part of the conditions of the lease. That's why it's important for all you folks to see what the terms of the lease are. Also, another thing that disturbed me tonight is at the CPC meeting, the original application said that this project was going to be somewhere near $1 million. At the CPC meeting, I questioned that. I said I thought it'd be between 3 and 5. During that meeting, the applicant said they said it would be about 3.2 or 3 at the time. Tonight, it's up to 5 million. Okay? So these numbers, I mean, there are just numbers flying around here tonight that no one seems to really have a handle on. If this happens, what's this? If that happens, I mean, and there's been at least 3 businessmen in this town that have looked at this as doing something with the theater, and it wasn't viable, okay? That's why nothing's been done yet. Also, I'm wondering, we know that the actual ownership is in a trust, but being in the trust there's other legal minds here, But in a trust, can we ever really find out who's in that trust? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'd like to know the answer to that. If, in fact, this property is bought in the future and the adjoining pieces are bought by the nonprofit, does that mean that those parcels therefore become non-taxable? I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure there are attorneys here that could answer that. Because possibly we could be taking a future valuable piece of property and not be able to render any taxes. One of the things too, given the disaster at the Station Club in Rhode Island, public safety, especially fire protection, is a big concern in any of these types of projects. And I'm wondering, to protect that building fire-wise, safety-wise, if I could ask this question to the applicant, what's that going to cost?
Okay, I guess if I can go back a couple of things. If anybody looks, the city of Boston and in a lot of the biggest cities, they invest heavily into their arts, into the nonprofits, and own multiple theaters. A lot of cities and towns own theaters, and for the one reason is to help their economic development. You know, if I thought the town wanted to take it on, which I think we've already got enough going on in this town, to purchase the building and to renovate the theater and then to run it, be happy to entertain that idea. Right now, we're here to try to do that. It's probably the last-ditch effort to do this. The previous attempts, while they were great, they just didn't do things the way you should do them. And one was setting up the nonprofit specifically for the theater. You are raising a lot of money. And to the previous speakers that we have to pay property taxes. No, we don't pay property taxes currently under the lease. We don't, if we don't purchase the building, our lease specifically states that we would pay taxes based on the portion of the square footage of the building that we take based on the tax, what's being paid for the property taxes. That doesn't kick in until we have an occupancy permit. So we owe nothing to the landlord at this time, so there is no chance of jeopardizing the lease. As far as the CPC costs, this is exactly why we don't say what the cost of the project's gonna be. I don't remember, I could have thought it was more in the 4 million when we were talking to the CPC committee, but there's a lot of things that went into the numbers, and again, preservation. Until we brought on the preservation architect recently, which was just this February, after all the CPC stuff, we didn't have a good idea. We brought on a construction company who, Dan Kelly, who helped us through all these costs. He put it into his estimating system. Dan, if anybody doesn't know, owns a big construction company who develops developed the Target here in Stoughton. He helped us with all the construction costs and get us some better numbers to the best of his ability. He also helped us with a construction timeline. All these things are part of our Mass Cultural Grant application. And like I said, it's a moving target, and we're doing the best we can trying to narrow this down. If we do fail, you know, the ultimate thing for that site is it's going to be sold and knocked down.
Excuse me, Mr. Martin, with all due respect, I didn't ask these questions.
Sorry, let him finish, Mr. DeFelice.
He was supposed to answer the
Please let
question.
him finish.
But he's not answering
He's
my question.
got the floor.
Yeah, fine. But answer the questions.
A few years back, the previous owners had talked about knocking it down and making it into parking, and the town entered into a parking agreement behind the theater for some spaces, and so they could try to renovate the theater and whatever. So, you know, we're here, we're trying not to do this, and we're trying to save the theater, revitalize the downtown, and, you know, like I said, we just, you can't put a hard number on it, and we're trying not to say that it's, you know, this number, because until we get into this thing, we're not sure, but we're looking to raise, hopefully, what's the worst-case scenario.
Mr. DeFelice.
Mr. Chairman, I think that explanation was given earlier. The question I had asked for, a question specifically was, what is the cost going to be for the fire protection of that building?
don't have the exact number in my hand. It's part of the construction costs that we are, have.
So when Mr. Kelly
So,
went through
you
and
know,
developed his estimates, he included
It's
bringing
significant.
it up to code, fire code?
Yeah, it's significant.
But it's not sprinkled today, right?
Parts of it is sprinkled, but it's inadequate, and everything needs to be brought up to, and again, we're adjoining these, the other buildings and incorporating everything else. And it's just not sprinklers alone that you're talking about, so.
Also, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, at the last meeting I went to, which was at the CPC hearing, it was specifically stated that one of their responsibilities was to pay the taxes on the building and to make improvements. Whether some people forgot, that's fine.
Well, I think
That's
he
what was
meant
said.
That, I think he said tonight that over the course of 7 years, the project has to be showing improvements, which is what the project is. So, I mean, I think he said that implicitly.
No, what I said before was, as part of the conditions of getting a quote-unquote free lease, the corporation had to be making improvements and paying taxes. That's what was stated, and if no one remembers that, that's fine.
No, we do remember it, Ed, but I think you're
certainly do
forgetting the one
remember.
piece where we don't pay taxes until we have an occupancy permit.
Okay, see, every time we go to a hearing, with all due respect again, there's a lot of different variables that come up. and
It's
different,
just in your
answers.
recollection, that's all.
I guess you're right. Also,
Ed, we need to get wrapped
yeah,
up
okay.
here.
The other thing, there was a statement made about perceived parking problem. Do any of you sitting on this board or sitting in this room think we have a perceived problem, or do you see a traffic and parking problem in Stoughton Center?
Okay.
So
that-
I would
that-
just want to
that
close.
point's been made.
Yeah, I just want to
We
close
get it.
with saying that when we voted for the CPC, I would guarantee that probably 100% of the voters did not anticipate that any tax money would be given to a private individual. We will have no
Okay,
skin in the
you've
game.
made
here.
that point, Ed, and it's
Well,
been made by others.
Thank
So
you.
please, let's move on. Mr. Linhoffman, that'll be it. Forrest. Last question, Paul. You are the last question that we're going to entertain tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Forrest Lindwall, Precinct 5 Town Meeting member of the Redevelopment Authority and the Master Plan Committee. I've been the point guard for the last way too many months on behalf of the authority trying to acquire the Stoughton train station depot, and we are very, very close to closing a deal with the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority to do that. And we have selected a redeveloper for the train station. And I think what we've learned in that process and what you're hearing about tonight is that in order to really attack the redevelopment, revitalization of downtown Stoughton, it's got to be a public-private partnership. And this is the first step. John mentioned the redeveloper, that if you look at 2 anchors of your downtown revitalization, it's a train station with a restaurant and a theater that's a vibrant community center. You at least then have 2 anchors, okay, for the real start. And I think that's important. People have got to realize it's going to be a public-private relationship, a partnership. It's not going to happen by the town alone. It's certainly not going to happen by private developers on their own. So I would urge you to support this. The Redevelopment Authority wrote a letter, and I don't know why he included our letter in his packet.
Okay. We're going to move on. I need a motion to close the, Paul, I thought yours was to close the meeting. Please, if you've got a statement, I said you'd be the last one, so please make it.
We know how shy you are.
Paul Smith, yeah, right. Precinct 7. The petitioner is a former selectman, and as a former selectman, he appointed members of the current CPC. So I just wanted to state that. He obviously doesn't have a business plan ready, and he doesn't have his ducks in a row, so maybe he ought to withdraw it and put it in maybe on the special in the fall or next year. but that's his call. Thank you.
That wasn't a question. I'd like to, I'm sorry, from anyone on the planning board and the CPC or the finance committee, a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Motion to close.
Okay, it's second. Joe. All those in favor, and I need all committees to vote. Aye. All those opposed? All those abstaining? Okay, the finance committee is still in motion, still in meeting. Sit down. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of this. Excuse me, the finance committee is still in session. Okay. Okay, our next meeting is Wednesday, and we'll be looking to do voting on that day. Thursday, we're going to meet with Southeast Regional, and there's a few other things on the agenda then, but we'll also be doing voting that night, okay? Hello? Yeah, well, I'm not going to give up on it either. Pat Basil sent over some material on the library on renovations and information for government officials, so please take a look at it. It looks like pretty substantive information. I passed out, as part of the CPC budget, there was also another set of documents, 4 documents attached. Roberta and Joe? That's why you didn't hear the other stuff.
Too much noise. Make that count.
There were 4 pages passed out attached to the CPC budget. Those were sample pages of format suggestions for our version of what we're going to submit to town meeting. So please take a look at them, and I'd like to discuss them on Wednesday, okay? The last item is the meeting on Saturday was extremely informative, and I sent my thanks to the town manager and particularly the Human Resources Director for the presentation, and certainly for the Board of Selectmen and the school committee. So I just wanted to make that mention publicly. It was very helpful to us, really from an informational standpoint, and something that we can be useful. And of course, obviously, all those things, because that was an executive session, those things stay in confidence. I know I don't have to say that, but I need to say that. So none of those things should have been talked about. And I think that's it, unless there's any other business to talk about. Motion to adjourn? Frick and frack, okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? You're out.